Chapter 877. Xiao Wanru knew that Gu Shishu was not a good person in her last life. On the surface, it seemed to be just a quarrel between children, but Gu Shishu was actually very vicious. In her last life, after she and the second young master of the Wen's mansion killed Wen Shiqi, she couldn't even tolerate her, a widow, and instigated Madam of the Wen's mansion to drive her out. At that time she, who was homeless, had no way out and could only die in the end. If it weren't for Qi Baiyu or the person behind Qi Baiyu, she could only die at that time. Fourth sister, why do you say that? Xiao Wanru said calmly. Fifth younger sister, what I said? Actually, I don't think it's reasonable, but I really saw it, but I've never told anyone, not even mother. I don't know if fifth younger sister believes me. Xiao Kaling looked very conflicted, and her words were also incoherent. Xiao Wanru nodded with a smile and said, Of course I believe you, fourth sister. Compared with the other misses in the mansion, Xiao Kaling was the least scheming one, and she showed her thoughts directly on her face. I saw something when I was young. I think it's true, but I'm afraid and I don't dare to say it. Xiao Kaling looked a little flustered and reached out to hold Xiao Wanru's hand, as if she wanted to borrow Xiao Wanru's strength. Xiao Wanru looked at her with a smile and let her hold her hand. Xiao Kaling held Xiao Wanru's hand so hard that Xiao Wanru's wrist was a little painful. Even so, Xiao Wanru did not shake her off and still let her hold her hand. Perhaps Xiao Wanru's calmness had sensed Xiao Kaling's reaction. Xiao Kaling calmed down a little and relaxed her hand slowly, but still held Xiao Wanru's hand. She looked at Xiao Wanru and said with a serious face, Fifth sister, I think when Xian was killed by Gu Shishu. Xiao Wanru didn't understand at the moment. After asking, she suddenly thought that this was Wen Shiqi's younger sister who died early, and her face immediately became gloomy. She's the miss of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion and the only daughter of the Deputy Prime Minister's wife. At that time, we played together. It was only after Wen Xian's accident that the two families blocked this side door. They said that every time the Deputy Prime Minister saw this side door, he would remember the pain of losing his daughter. Xiao Kaling explained in a low voice. Since she had started the conversation, the rest was much easier. The place where Wen Xian was killed was also the place where she fell into the water. On that day, I was playing with third sister. Later, third sister was called away, so I ran away alone. Because I ran to the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion from the side door, I was originally going to play with Wen Xian, but I didn't expect to see Gu Shishu and eldest sister. They were hiding together and talking about something. There was no one else around to serve them. Seeing that they were very sneaky, I also hid. Later, when I saw them leave after talking for a while, I didn't pay much attention to them and ran back by myself. Later, I heard that Wen Xian had an accident. The place where the accident happened to be the place where I saw Gu Shishu and eldest sister hiding and talking. Later, I remembered that there was one of Wen Xian's shoes there, and Gu Shishu threw it into the water when she left. Xiao Kaling stammered again with a flash of horror in her eyes. At that time, she didn't pay much attention to it. When she saw Gu Shishu and Xiao Yanru leave, she picked up a shoe on the ground and threw it into the water. She just thought it was fun and wondered whose shoe had been thrown into the water. There were many children, big and small. Sometimes, they would purposely hide or throw away other people's shoes or other things on their body. They had done it all before. The children of the third branch had always been on good terms with the children of the second branch, so Xiao Kaling didn't come out at that time. But later, she felt a lingering fear. If she had come out at that time, would she have been punished by Gu Shishu and Xiao Yanru together? If that was the case, would she also slip and fall into the water? After Wen Xian's accident, Xiao Kaling was so scared that she fell ill in the mansion for half a year. During this half year, she had been in a coma. Every time she thought of the scene at that time, Xiao Kaling was scared and flustered. She was in a state of panic. Later, her wet nurse learned about it. While comforting her, the wet nurse told her not to tell anyone and warned her that old madam attached most importance to the first miss in the mansion. If the first miss was involved in this matter and old madam knew it, she was afraid that something bad would happen. The third branch of Marquis Xing's mansion had never attached importance to it. If the third master were not old Madam's biological son, he would probably have been sent away with some meager family property. Moreover, Xiao Kailing didn't really see them push someone into the water, so there was no evidence to prove it. The wet nurse was afraid that Xiao Kailing would be sent to a remote village for recuperation by old Madam in the name of recuperation and would never be able to return to the capital city. She might even die outside, so she repeatedly told her not to tell anyone about it. No matter who it was, she should not tell anyone. But now Xiao Kailing was very flustered. She felt that she must have been discovered by Gu Shishu. Otherwise, Gu Shishu wouldn't want to kill her, ask her out, and then push her into the water. Who else could it be other than Gu Shishu? Fifth sister, I think Gu Shishu must have known that I saw it, so she did it on purpose. Xiao Kailing was very flustered at this time, so she told Xiao Wenru about the buried past. When Shichi's sister was actually killed by Gu Shishu. After hearing Xiao Kailing's words, Xiao Wenru believed her. If when Shichi's sister were still alive, Madam of the Prime Minister would never treat Gu Shishu so well. Therefore, Wen Xian's existence was the obstacle for Gu Shishu to get Madam of the Prime Minister's love. However, Xiao Yinru was also involved in it, which surprised her. With a flash of inspiration, she remembered Dr. Qiu. In her last life, Dr. Qiu, who had treated Wen Shichi, didn't enter the Prime Minister's mansion but Marquis Xing's mansion to treat Wang Yishu. Could it be the relationship between Gu Shishu and Xiao Yenru? Wen Xian's existence had nothing to do with Xiao Yenru. As long as Xiao Yenru was on good terms with Wen Xian, she might be on good terms with the Prime Minister's mansion. Given Xiao Yenru's character, she would definitely do the same. In this case, it could only be Gu Shishu who did it. If she guessed correctly, it should be Gu Shishu who did it, and Xiao Yenru happened to see it. Although they were young, they were both ruthless. After reaching an agreement, Xiao Yenru covered up what she saw and helped Gu Shishu. Xiao Yenru had something on Gu Shishu, so it would be much easier for Xiao Yenru to ask Gu Shishu to do anything in the future. With something on Gu Shishu, it was more beneficial than being on good terms with Wen Xian. He slightly lowered his eyes, and his pupils contracted. Then, a bloodthirsty and vicious aura slowly seeped out. No wonder Gu Shishu didn't want to keep him alive in the last life. Originally, he was just a useless person. Even if he was raised in the backyard of the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion, he wouldn't be of much use. The Deputy Prime Minister's mansion had raised so many people, and he was really not a big deal. Therefore, neither Wen Shichi nor Xiao Wenru had expected the scene in the morning hall. Before Wen Shichi died, he even repeatedly told Xiao Wenru that he had made an agreement with his mother that if Xiao Wenru wanted to stay in the Wen's mansion in the future, the Wen's mansion would definitely take care of her. If she wanted to leave, the Wen's mansion would also prepare some property for her so that she could live a good life even if she left the Wen's mansion. But the fact was beyond her and Wen Shichi's expectation. Wen Shichi had always been intelligent. Even when he was so ill, he had arranged a way out for her. He was sure that Xiao Wenru would have no worries in the future, so he closed his eyes. In fact, the fact gave Wen Shichi a hard slap in the face. But at that time, he was already dead. His mother and Gu Shishu viciously drove her out of the morning hall and out of the Prime Minister's mansion with groundless charges. If it hadn't been for someone pushing them hard in the back, the Prime Minister's mansion wouldn't have done this. It would be bad for the reputation of the Prime Minister's mansion if their daughter-in-law was driven out before their son's body was cold. But even so, they still did it. Therefore, Xiao Yenru closed her eyes hard, slowly sensed the coldness in her heart, and then slowly opened her eyes. She didn't comment on Madame Wen's behavior, but she didn't show much respect for her. She was not a saint and had her own concept of right and wrong. But she would not let go of Gu Shishu and Xiao Yenru. Perhaps it was not only Dr. Qiu, but also Xiao Yenru behind the scenes. She didn't expect that even though Xiao Yenru had been given the cold shoulder after entering the Imperial Palace and almost had no chance to make a comeback, Xiao Yenru still had such great power that she could provoke Gu Shishu to attack her. When she was in Wen Shichi's study, she had felt strange that Gu Shishu didn't seem to want to expose her. If the person in the painting was really her in this life, she must have felt guilty after being frightened by Gu Shishu's actions. Gu Shishu must be sure that the person in the painting was her. If that was the case, Gu Shishu didn't want to expose her, so she was blackmailing her. Xiao Yenru, as the instigator, was pulling strings behind the scenes. Gu Shishu threatened her to do something to save Xiao Yenru. What a good scheme. Otherwise, Gu Shishu, who was determined to win Shichi's heart, should want to ruin her reputation instead of blackmailing her. Fifth sister, you don't believe me, do you? Seeing Xiao Wenru remain silent for a long time, Xiao Kailing asked anxiously. Fourth sister, of course I believe you. Be careful in the future. Don't let Gu Shishu find out that you know something. Otherwise, what happened today may happen again. Xiao Wenru warned her softly. In fact, not only Gu Shishu, but also her mansion. With old Madam's character, she would definitely protect Xiao Yenru. Now she was curious about who pushed Xiao Kailing behind the scenes. Was it really Gu Shishu? She felt that it didn't seem to be Gu Shishu. If it wasn't Gu Shishu, who could it be? Did anyone also find out the problem? Don't worry. I won't say it. I don't dare to say it, but I won't let Gu Shishu off. Although Xiao Kailing was timid, she was unwilling to let Gu Shishu slip away in vain. Fourth sister, don't worry. Even if we don't investigate it, the Deputy Prime Minister's mansion will. Since this thing happened in the guest's mansion, they will investigate it even if they suppress it. Otherwise, it may be the people in their mansion who get into trouble next time. Xiao Wenru smiled slightly and said meaningfully, this matter wouldn't end like this. Chapter 878. Tell me what the hell is going on? The Prime Minister's wife asked with a gloomy face. She had just sent off the guests in the mansion. In fact, she was exhausted, but she still did not rest and asked someone to summon Gu Shishu. And it's really not me. Why did I push forth Miss Xiao? Why did I push her for no reason? Gu Shishu cried aggrievedly again. She looked delicate, and the way she wiped her tears and looked aggrieved at this moment was very distressing. Since it's not you, who is it? Since you asked her to come with you, why did you leave? This time, the Prime Minister's wife did not ask any more questions when she saw her crying aggrievedly. This happened in the mansion, but she did not know anything about it. This was a very dangerous thing. Inexplicably thinking of her little daughter, who also fell into the water and died, the Prime Minister's wife's heart ached. She loved this little daughter the most, but she did not expect that she would die early. I was supposed to accompany fourth Miss Xiao, but on the way, I said that second cousin was looking for me, so I went to have a look. Gu Shishu's eyes drifted. The Prime Minister's wife was very angry. Her second son was not a proper person. He and Gu Shishu had been having an affair for a long time, and now they were in such a situation. She was very angry before, and she really wanted Gu Shishu to be her second son's concubine. But recently, her sister-in-law's transfer order was coming back, and it was said that she should be promoted. The Prime Minister also thought that her second son was a good-for-nothing anyway, and he was afraid that it was impossible for him to marry a wife from a noble family, so he simply married Gu Shishu. Whether she was a concubine or not, she would lose the face of her family. Besides, her sister-in-law would definitely not agree. The Prime Minister's wife thought about it and felt that it was reasonable, so she agreed to let Gu Shishu marry her second son instead of being his concubine. That was why she brought her out to this banquet and let her show off in front of others. She did not expect that Gu Shishu would cause trouble again, and it was related to her second son. The Prime Minister's wife knocked on the table hard and said angrily, "Why does Shi-an want to see you? Why does he have to come at this time? It's nothing important. It's just some outside affairs. Second cousin doesn't know." Gu Shishu pinched the corner of her clothes guiltily and lowered her head, blushing. In fact, she was also very disgusted. If Wenxian had not repeatedly asked her to go out, she would not have gone out. When she went out, it was indeed Wenxian. However, when Wenxian saw her, there was nothing good. He just hugged her and kissed her a little. He said that they had no time to see each other recently. At this time, when Madam of the Prime Minister was too busy to lift her hand, she called Gu Shishu over. Gu Shishu had always liked Shichi the most, but now she had no choice but to marry Wenxian. Although she didn't like him, she could only let him hug and kiss her for a while. After that, she left Wenxian with the excuse that she had to help Madam when entertain the guests. However, it was inconvenient for her to say this to the Prime Minister's wife, so she could only vaguely push the responsibility to Wenxian. Hearing that it was Wenxian again, Mrs. Wen was furious. Her other two sons, no matter the eldest son or the youngest son, were very promising. Only her second son was not good at literature or martial arts. Moreover, he was such a playful person. It was fine that he was always messing around with Gu Shishu, but on this day, he was actually fooling around with her. He did not look like a son of an aristocratic family at all. Of decency. Madame Wen was so angry that she was gasping for breath. She wished that she had never given birth to this second son. "Aunt, I really didn't push forth Miss Xiao. Who knows if she slipped and fell into the water and pushed the blame to me? How could I push her at the same time? Besides, I didn't know that second cousin came to me in advance, and it was impossible for me to arrange someone else in advance." Seeing that the minister's wife was angry, Gu Shishu felt aggrieved and wiped her tears with her handkerchief. The Prime Minister's wife took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in her heart. She had raised Gu Shishu since she was a child and treated her as her daughter, so she liked her very much. Seeing Gu Shishu's aggrieved look, her heart softened. Her second son was disappointing and always wronged her niece. How could the minister's wife not know that Gu Shishu liked Wenshichi? But now, due to a combination of circumstances, she could only do this. "Does anyone else know that you have an appointment with fourth Miss Xiao?" The minister's wife calmed down and stopped scolding Gu Shishu. She did not believe that Xiao Kailing would deliberately fall into the water in order to frame Gu Shishu. In such cold weather, one mishap could lead to a lifelong illness, not to mention that Xiao Kailing was an unmarried girl. If she got cold all over her body, it would also affect her children in the future. "I just came up with this idea on the spur of the moment. I just want to ask fourth Miss Xiao to go for a walk. We haven't seen each other for so many years. Let's go for a walk and talk about our childhood." Gu Shishu cried, and her voice became more and more trembling. It was obvious that she was holding back her grievances. Because she was the cousin of the minister's mansion, many manners often ignored her when inviting people. So the minister's wife rarely took her out. Seeing her like this, Madam of the Prime Minister felt even more distressed. Thinking about it, it made sense. Because Gu Shishu was not the daughter of her mansion, other mansions rarely sent an invitation card to invite her directly. Even if she really loved her as her daughter, she owed her in this regard. During this period, she had been staying in the mansion and did not let her go out at all. This was also because the minister's wife was so angry that she asked her to be her second son's concubine. As a concubine, of course, it was inconvenient for her to go out in front of everyone. She also had to find a good marriage for her second son. Thinking of this, the minister's wife increasingly felt that Gu Shishu was really wronged. Her sister-in-law and her husband were about to return to the capital city. At this time, she couldn't let Gu Shishu feel wronged again. "Well, don't cry. I'll find out who wants to frame you." The minister's wife's voice softened. While they were talking, a maid came in and reported, "Madam, third young master is here. Let him in." Hearing that her most promising youngest son had come, Madame Wen immediately became happy and said hurriedly. Gu Shishu also raised her head. Tears were still in the corners of her eyes, but a pair of watery eyes had eagerly looked at the door. When she saw Wenshichi at the door, the affection in her eyes almost overflowed. The handsome and elegant third cousin in front of her was the person she wanted to marry, not second cousin. In the past, when she hooked up with second cousin, she didn't think that she would marry second cousin, so she didn't care very much. In the end, because she could only follow second cousin, Wenxian, the more she looked at him, the more she felt that Wenxian was very stupid. How could the handsome third cousin compare with him? Because she really couldn't marry second cousin. She wanted to marry third cousin. There must be a way. There must be a way. Didn't Xiao Yinru also say that as long as she hadn't married second cousin, she would still have a chance? Unmarried men and unmarried women, there would be plenty of opportunities, wouldn't there? Thinking of this, Gu Shishu looked at Wenshichi with increasingly passionate eyes, and her eyes were full of affection. Wenshichi stepped forward, bowed to Madame Wen, and sat down. Gu Shishu hurriedly took 2 steps forward in a delicate manner, bowed to Wen Shiqi and said, "Greetings, third cousin." She had cried just now, and her face was still wet with tears, which was extremely attractive. Especially her eyes, which were overflowing with charm, looked at Wen Shiqi softly. Perhaps because Wen Shiqi didn't say anything for a long time, her body swayed, her feet slanted, and she couldn't stand still and fell straight toward Wen Shiqi. Wen Shiqi reached out to hold her hand, and Gu Shishu involuntarily leaned against him. Even though Madame Wen felt that she owed Gu Shishu, she couldn't bear to see it anymore and snorted coldly. Wen Shiqi stood up and leaned to one side. As soon as he loosened his grip, Gu Shishu's body bumped straight into the chair he had been sitting on. With a cry of "ouch," Gu Shishu failed to control her movements and bumped into the railing of the chair. It was so painful that 2 drops of tears at the corners of her eyes immediately fell down, making her look extremely miserable. "Sit down and talk." Madame Wen's face darkened. No matter how partial she was to Gu Shishu, she couldn't help getting angry at this time. Gu Shishu was now her second son's woman, but she still pulled her youngest son. It was improper. Seeing that Madame Wen was really angry, Gu Shishu didn't dare to move anymore. She endured the pain of hitting the chair, sat under it, and looked obedient. A trace of disgust flashed across Wen Shiqi's eyes, but he calmly sat down on the chair opposite her, as if the scene just now had no effect on him at all. "Mother, I've already checked. No one has been to the place where 4th Miss Xiao fell into the water. Only my cousin took her there." When Shiqi reported to Prime Minister Wen's madam, who had asked her youngest son to check it out. If there was really someone with bad intentions in the mansion, it would be a disaster if he stayed in the mansion. Moreover, this always reminded her of her youngest daughter who died young, and she inexplicably felt that there might be some involvement. But now it seemed that this matter really had nothing to do with anyone except Gu Shishu. Hearing her youngest son's words, Madame Wen looked at Gu Shishu suspiciously. "Aunt, third cousin, this really has nothing to do with me. I was really wronged. In fact, I don't know anything except that I asked 4th Miss Xiao to go there." Seeing that the situation was not good, Gu Shishu immediately burst into tears again. Tears slid down her white and tender face, which made people feel sorry for her. Madame Wen, in particular, opened her mouth to comfort Gu Shishu, and suddenly heard her youngest son say, "Cousin, when my sister had an accident, you seemed to say the same thing. Why are you saying this now?" In fact, Wen Shiqi's words were unintentional. But as soon as he finished speaking, not only did his face change greatly, but also Madame Wen's face turned as pale as snow. Both of them fixed their eyes on Gu Shishu. Chapter 879. In fact, Wen Shiqi just said that casually. But after saying that, his head buzzed, and doubts that he had never had immediately rose in his heart. Wen Shiqi still remembered what had happened when his sister had an accident. At that time, Gu Shishu and Wen Xian were indeed playing together. But later, Gu Shishu was called away, leaving Wen Xian alone. Then the wet nurse who was guarding Wen Xian was also called away. When everyone finally found Wen Xian, her little body was already dead. At that time, Madame of the Prime Minister cried and fainted beside her daughter. Gu Shishu kept calling her cousin and cried so hard that she couldn't get up. She only said that if she hadn't left at that time, her cousin would have been fine. It was also because she cried and fainted with Madame of the Prime Minister. Madame of the Prime Minister doted on her so much that she even doted on her more than her sons. The two things inexplicably overlapped. Wen Shiqi immediately remembered what had happened at that time. At that time, Gu Shishu was involved in it. In the past, he had never doubted Gu Shishu, nor had he thought of this old thing buried deep in his heart. But now he no longer believed in Gu Shishu, so he would naturally speculate about her with the greatest malice. Thinking of this, all the hair on his body stood on end. If his sister didn't really fall into the water, was it possible that Gu Shishu was the one who did it? Madame of the Prime Minister seemed to think of this. Her lips trembled twice, and she looked at Gu Shishu, but she couldn't say a word. She didn't dare to guess. "Third cousin, what are you talking about? I was wrong about my cousin. I didn't keep an eye on her, so she. But what about 4th Miss Xiao? What does it have to do with me?" Fourth Miss Xiao is an adult, so it has nothing to do with me. I really don't know who wants to hurt me and fourth Miss Xiao. Gu Shishu panicked and hurriedly covered her face and cried. This time, she didn't dare to cry like a pear blossom in the rain, but really cried. She leaned against the side of the chair and cried, "If third cousin blames me for not taking good care of my cousin, I will admit it. Even if third cousin wants me to pay for my cousin's death, I will be willing. But I really don't admit what happened today. It really has nothing to do with me." Seeing that she was crying so hard that she collapsed on the chair, and hearing her say this, Madame Wenxiang's tears also fell. Her youngest daughter's death was a scar in her heart. No matter when it was touched, it would hurt. Alright, don't cry. You can't be blamed for this. It's all Yenu's fault, it's all Yenu's fault. Speaking up to this point, Madame Wenxiang started sobbing uncontrollably. Mother, don't be sad. Little sister, it's been so long. If little sister is still alive, she would have been reincarnated into a good family and would be living happily now. Seeing his mother crying like this, Wenxichi was afraid that she would hurt herself, so he tried to comfort her. Every time Madame Wenxiang thought of her youngest daughter, she couldn't stop crying. For so many years, Madame Wenxiang had been in poor health because of this incident. Sometimes she would faint while crying. Wenxichi didn't dare to let his mother continue crying like this, so he comforted her softly. I know. I also thought so. I thought that such a good girl as your little sister would definitely be reincarnated into a better family, but... Madame Wenxiang cried while wiping her tears. Aunt, I am willing to give up. This black hair prays for cousin sister. From now on, I only hope that cousin sister can marry into a good family and be happy and live a happy life. Gu Shishu also cried. Then she stood up and threw herself in front of Madame Wenxiang. She knelt down and put her hands under Madame Wenxiang's knees. Her words made Madame Wenxiang feel distressed and sad. Seeing Gu Shishu throw herself at her, she couldn't help hugging her and burst into tears. What are you talking about? You? As long as you are fine, I will be very happy. Your cousin doesn't need you to do this. All the previous displeasure and anger disappeared in Gu Shishu's crying. Madame of the Prime Minister hugged Gu Shishu and cried, as if she was hugging her own daughter. If her daughter was fine, she would have grown up now and could get married. She would also hug her so affectionately. Wenxichi frowned tightly, and a trace of fierceness flashed across his eyes. Since he suspected this matter, he had to investigate it. In fact, Wenxichi originally wanted to teach Gu Shishu a lesson so that she wouldn't dare to frame up Xiao Wanru in the future. The person he wanted to push into the water was Gu Shishu. Unexpectedly, the servant he sent only saw a mist there and thought it was Gu Shishu, so he pushed Xiao Kaling into the water. The scene he saw outside the study made Wenxichi realize that Gu Shishu had other intentions. It seemed that she wanted to threaten him and Xiao Wanru with this, so he immediately sent someone to take action. Although he was gentle, he never thought that he would always be upright and elegant. He should take action when it was time to take action. There seemed to be someone behind Gu Shishu. He did that not only to teach Gu Shishu a lesson, but also to force out the person behind Gu Shishu. He didn't expect that he would push the wrong person to the wrong person by accident. However, now it made him doubt what had happened in the past. After so many years, it was impossible to investigate this matter now. It seemed that his mother was very distressed about Gu Shishu, but Wenxichi felt that if he wanted to investigate it, there would be some clues. He was now in the Ministry of Justice, so it was easy for him to have doubts about some things. Gu Shishu looked guilty now. Since she was guilty, there must be something wrong. The next few days were very peaceful. Xiao Kaling's matter was not a big deal, and old madam just gave her some medicine to nourish her body. Because Xiao Wanru gave Xiao Kaling brown sugar hot ginger soup in time, Xiao Kaling was indeed frightened but not hurt. Marquis Xing's mansion was very busy in the next few days. The whole mansion was so busy that even old madam had to help Xiao Wanru choose and prepare for her marriage. Because of the recent events in Marquis Xing's mansion, except for Xiao Wanru's, none of them was good. Marquis Xing's mansion had to be very careful to prepare for Xiao Wanru's marriage. The Empress Dowager in the Imperial Palace even sent someone to warn old madam of Marquis Xing's mansion, suggesting that if there was another accident in Xiao Wanru's marriage, Marquis Xing's mansion might even lose the title of nobility. Since the Empress Dowager's hint, old Madame did not dare to take it lightly. She did not intend to release her two granddaughters, who were locked up, lest they spoil things again. Zhao Xiran was quite useful. Although he was new to many things, he would always send them to old Madame and let her make a decision. Moreover, he listened to old Madame's orders very respectfully, which made old Madame very satisfied. Zhao Xiran was not as disgusted as before. She liked Zhao Xiran originally. Of course, this affection was also related to Minister Zhao's mansion behind Zhao Xiran. If it weren't for the demotion of nobility, old Madame would have valued Zhao Xiran more. Xiao Wanru still closed the door to sew embroidery. Xiao Kailing came over from time to help, but her help was different from that of Xiao Tehuan in the past. Xiao Kailing was not utilitarian. Sometimes when she felt that something was wrong, she would put forward her own opinions. Compared with Xiao Tehuan, the two of them got along more like equal sisters. In the whole Marquis Xing's mansion, only Xiao Kailing made Xiao Wanru feel some sisterly affection. It was also a very unexpected thing. Xiao Kailing was not close to Xiao Wanru. If it weren't for this accident, the two of them would not be so close. Time passed in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, it was the day of Prince Chen's marriage. Xiao Wanru was called up early in the morning. She first took a bath and changed her clothes, and then she was taken to the dressing table to have her face washed. The status of the whole blessing madam was also extraordinary. In the past, she was the most distinguished whole blessing madam invited by some noble aristocratic families. The so-called whole blessing madam had to have both parents and children. The husband and wife should be in harmony with each other. Moreover, she had to be of noble status. It was really not easy to find such a whole blessing madam. Fortunately, today was Prince Chen's marriage, so they could invite this madam. Of course, this so-called whole blessing madam was actually a princess in the Imperial family. Her status was not something that ordinary families could afford. However, when Prince Chen got married, the Empress Dowager's favorite grandson and the Emperor's favorite nephew were present. No one dared not to invite her. Looking at Xiao Wanru, who was exceedingly beautiful, Chuanfu Madam kept praising her. She said that she had seen so many new brides, but she had never seen one as beautiful as Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru was so beautiful that she was the best match for Prince Chen. The Empress Dowager would definitely like her very much. Everyone who saw Prince Chen's face said that he was extremely handsome, like a beautiful young man coming out of a painting. Many people had been secretly mocking the fifth miss of Marquis Xing's mansion. If they lifted the red veil and found that the bride was not as beautiful as the groom, it would be a joke in the future. Whole blessing madam had secretly mocked Xiao Wanru in her heart before. Now seeing Xiao Wanru's face, she had to say that the two of them were really a match made in heaven. With such a beautiful appearance, no one else could match her. This would be the most pleasing to the eyes, and also the most compatible pair. Whole blessing madam kept praising Xiao Wanru with a smile, while helping to lift Xiao Wanru's veil. Xiao Wanru's smooth little face became more moist because of this. It was unknown whether it was because the hair on her face had been plucked or because of the atmosphere here, but Xiao Wanru's face had been red all the time, which made her look more delicate and charming. On such a good day, Xiao Caihuan and Xiao Jie were also released. If they still didn't come out on such a good day, their marriage would be affected. Zhao Xiran personally pleaded for them, and Xiao Wanru did not object, so old madam complied and released all of them. Xiao Jie sat aside and looked at Xiao Wanru's beautiful face with jealousy. The handkerchief in her hand was almost crushed. How nice it would be if she were the one who got married at this time. Now she was not sure whether Commandery Prince Qing's mansion wanted her or her third sister. She hadn't finished what her grandma had asked her to do before, so she didn't dare to ask old madam. Chapter 880. Xiao Caihuan was also looking at Xiao Wanru with envy and sadness in her eyes. After so many things, she now understood that some things were too delusional. She lowered her head slightly with a veil still on her face. Her face had not recovered yet, and it was uncertain whether it could recover. Thinking that she had dared to have thoughts about Prince Chen before, She felt a deep sense of inferiority. How could a person like Prince Chen take a fancy to a disfigured girl like her? Moreover, she almost got her whole family killed. If she had any delusions before, now she had nothing. Sister. Xiao Kaling sat beside her. Seeing her like this, she reached out to hold her hand and comforted her. Xiao Zaihuan shook her head, took a deep breath, and motioned for Xiao Kaling not to worry. After such a thing, she had no other thoughts in her heart now. She only felt that her family was safe and sound. She had really been bewitched before. Perhaps she had been suppressed by Xiao Yanru all the time. Once Xiao Yanru was gone, she immediately became arrogant. With a wry smile on her lips, she raised her eyes and looked at Xiao Wanru with a little envy. Her lost fifth sister was blessed after all. Judging from Prince Chen's look that day, she knew that he really cared about her. Who in the capital city could make Prince Chen, who was so handsome as if he had walked out of a painting, pay so much attention to her? It was said that Prince Chen was weak and couldn't marry a wife, but the royal family didn't care so much. Even if Prince Chen was really going to die, he would still marry someone he should marry. Prince Chen hadn't married for so many years just because Prince Chen didn't like her. In the past few days, Xiao Zaihuan had been very quiet in the Buddha Hall, which also reminded her of many things. If it was really as she guessed, then her fifth sister's blessing was really limitless. If there was a man in this world who waited for her to grow up, what kind of affection would it be? Moreover, such a man was born in the royal family. 3 years ago, her fifth sister was actually just a child, but 3 years ago, Prince Chen could get married. The more he thought about it, the more ridiculous he felt. He was like a clown. Even when he had his appearance, he was not a match for fifth younger sister, let alone now. Even when Xiao Yanru had a good reputation, Prince Chen had not been tempted. For this reason, Xiao Zaihuan gave up. There was a hint of blessing in her envious eyes, hoping that Xiao Wanru was really happy. There were many girls of this generation in Duke Xing's mansion, but the first few were not so good. Third younger sister, I really didn't do it on purpose that day. I hope third younger sister can forgive me. A gentle voice suddenly came into her ears. It was Zhao Shiran's voice. Sister-in-law. Xiao Zaihuan's eyes turned cold. Third sister? Zhao Shiran's face was full of guilt, and he looked more and more sad. He wanted to explain, but was interrupted by Xiao Zaihuan. Sister-in-law, today is fifth sister's big day. Don't say those hurtful words. Even if I misunderstood you before, please forgive me. Xiao Zaihuan's words were very clear, and she did not argue about who was right or wrong. Now that things had come to this, she had no other thoughts. The reason why she made a scene in Zhao Shiran's bridal chamber was that she was afraid that her parents would be involved in this matter. However, she could not explain it clearly, so she could only lead her grandmother's attention to Zhao Shiran through this matter. The matter had passed, but the past could not be recovered. It was impossible for them to be as close as before. Zhao Shiran was now the eldest sister-in-law, but he was just the eldest sister-in-law, and he was the sister-in-law of the next branch. Naturally, they were not so close. Zhao Shiran still wanted to say something, but seeing that Xiao Zaihuan had looked away, he knew that it was useless for him to say anything. Xiao Jie rubbed her handkerchief and her eyes fell on Zhao Shiran and Xiao Zaihuan. She was sitting in a corner, so she was not noticeable. Zhao Shiran and Xiao Zaihuan's voices were a little low, and the people in the room were noisy. She could not hear what they were talking about, but she was sure that they were not very happy. She rolled her eyes and called a servant girl. When she was about to give some orders, she suddenly turned around and saw Zhao Shiran's eyes falling on her. Their eyes met. Xiao Jie panicked for a while, but Zhao Shiran showed a slight smile and moved his lips silently. Be careful. Hearing Zhao Shiran's silent voice, Xiao Jie panicked. Second Mississippi, the servant girl she called was already standing in front of her. Seeing her stunned, she called out. It's all right. You can go. Xiao Jie waved her hand and said. She did want to do something, but now she didn't dare to. Zhao Shiran had seen her. The silent warning made her not dare to act rashly. After thinking for a while, she didn't take out the other handkerchief in her sleeve. She couldn't see through Zhao Shiran, so she didn't know whether he would help her or Zhao Shiran. At this time, Xiao Jie felt that it was better not to act rashly. Moreover, Zhao Xiran's words were obviously a warning. The handkerchief was the same as her ordinary handkerchief, but it was embroidered with the character Xiao. The incense was also Xiao Wanru's favorite incense in the past. Such a handkerchief could easily make people think that it belonged to Xiao Wanru. On such a happy day today, if such a handkerchief was found on another man, Xiao Wanru's reputation would be ruined. But she suddenly didn't dare to do it. Xiao Wanru's head was covered with a veil, so she couldn't see what was going on outside. However, Yu Jie had been staring at the sisters of Marquis Xing's mansion, so she naturally saw that Xiao Jie had asked the servant girl she had called to leave after silently looking at first grandma. She had an intuition that there was something wrong. Second Miss was the kind of person who would make trouble out of nothing. She watched Xiao Jie's hand leave the cuff silently. While no one was paying attention, she tidied Xiao Wanru's collar and told Xiao Jie what she had seen just now in a low voice. Xiao Wanru said in a low voice, "Ask Qing to keep an eye on her later." Yu Jie nodded. At this time, the bride's escort had arrived outside. No one expected that Prince Chen would welcome them in person. It seemed impossible for Prince Chen to welcome them in person, both in terms of his identity and his health. Marquis Xing's mansion had already made such preparations. When they saw Prince Chen, who was dressed in red and had black hair, looking handsome and enchanting as usual, the guests were all in an uproar. Prince Chen actually came to welcome them in person. There was a smile on Chu Liuchen's face, which made him look very gentle. He was dressed in a bright red brocade robe, which made his face and lips look very handsome. Not only did he come, but he also brought a group of royal brothers with him. Whether it was Prince Yu, Prince Zhou, or even Prince Exin, they all let everyone see the 4 outstanding heirs of the royal family at once. There must be the next emperor among them. Thinking of this, many people screamed with excitement. In addition to these royal brothers, there were also some princes, dukes, and marquises from the princesses' mansions. Each of them was outstanding. Even if they didn't want to marry into the royal family, with so many handsome talents, the whole capital city was very lively. Fortunately, the road for the bride's escort had already been cleared. Otherwise, it was hard to say when they would arrive at Marquis Xing's mansion. Although these people were all noble, they were all talented. All the way to the bridal chamber, the obstacles set by Marquis Xing's mansion were soon removed. In a burst of laughter, Xiao Wanru heard the footsteps coming towards her. She heard the voice of Prince Qin. It should be Chu Luchen. She inexplicably blushed. According to the custom in the capital city, the groom entered the mansion first, then left to wait outside the mansion, and the bride's brother carried the bride out of the mansion. Chu Luchen stood in front of Xiao Wanru and looked at Xiao Wanru, who was wearing a red veil. His eyes became more and more tranquil, with joy that could not be seen in the past. After putting the jade apple in his hand in front of Xiao Wanru, he turned around and left with a group of royal disciples to wait outside. His light and vigorous footsteps made a group of women, who had been sad, feel even more sad. Didn't they say that Prince Qin was in poor health? As the matron of honor said happy and auspicious words, she put the jade apple in Xiao Wanru's hand and helped Xiao Wanru to get up. Xiao Hua had been waiting at the door for a long time. After Xiao Wanru came out, he carried Xiao Wanru to the gate. Xiao Wanru had no parents. Old Madame of Marquis Xing's mansion and Great Elder Princess were sitting in the main seats in the hall outside. And Great Elder Princess had won her dignity when she fought with Old Madame of Marquis Xing's mansion. At this time, she was sitting high. When she saw Xiao Hua and carrying Xiao Wanru out, her eyes turned red. After Xiao Wanru stopped and bowed to the 2 elders, and Great Elder Princess wiped her tears. However, Old Madam, who did not look so domineering, looked very relaxed. She only took a handkerchief and gently wiped the corners of her eyes, and then gave orders in an orderly manner. And Great Elder Princess burst into tears. Xiao Wanru bowed to the 2 elders again and then left in a panic while and Great Elder Princess cried. Tears fell from the corners of her eyes. In her last life, she had also been married. At that time, no one cried for her anymore. Madame Dowager and Shui Rulin had passed away. How could Madame D care about her life? She had schemed against her and wanted to leave early. Her tears fell silently on the ground in front of her. In this life, she had found her family again. To her, this was the most precious thing. For the sake of this family that she could protect, she would not let those people have their way no matter what. The bridal sedan was parked at the door. It was not an ordinary sedan but a big sedan with 8 people. After sitting in the bridal sedan, Xiao Wenru calmed down. Hearing the sound of starting the sedan coming from outside, she calmed down. The bridal sedan did not go directly to Prince Chen's mansion. It first went around half of the capital city, passed the front of the Imperial Palace, and then went to Prince Chen's mansion. People in the capital city had also seen Prince Chen, who was the most difficult to see because of his illness. For the first time, Prince Chen, who was pale and weak in the past, became lively. It turned out that Prince Chen was not as sick as others said. He was so handsome and unparalleled. This was the most noble Prince Chen. Did they misunderstand something? Does Chu Luchen have other intentions? At the gate of the palace, a person happened to come out. Seeing the bridal sedan passing in front of the palace gate, he suddenly stopped and whispered to the person beside him. Chapter 881. Master, I don't know. Shichi looked at the bridal sedan chair that was going away behind him and said, when a prince got married, he went to the gate of the palace, which was a sign of respect for the emperor who lived in the palace. At the same time, it also showed his filial piety to the emperor. But Chu Liuchen's identity was so unusual that people had to think more. Marrying the granddaughter of R and great elder princess. Prince Cheng muttered to himself and his face darkened. It was no wonder that he thought too much. He was going to attend the marriage of Prince Chen's mansion, but he just came from the palace. Both the emperor and the empress dowager expressed their love for this marriage, which was really surprising. Could it be that the 5th Miss Xiao, whom Chu Luchen married, was very fond of the empress dowager and the emperor? Or could it be understood that Chu Luchen was satisfied with the 5th Miss Xiao because of the emperor and the empress dowager's satisfaction? If so, Chu Liuchen's request was not ordinary. Moreover, Chu Liuchen's health had improved and he was no longer in a bad condition. Master. Seeing Prince Cheng looking at the back of the bridal sedan chair with a gloomy face, Shichi reminded him. They were still at the gate of the palace, and today was Prince Chen's big day. All the members of the royal family had to show a happy look. Prince Cheng coughed hard and showed a kind smile on his face. Maybe because he had stayed in the temple for a long time, his smile looked very peaceful, but people could feel that he was really happy. Prince Chen is married now. That's great. Prince Cheng muttered to himself. Then he seemed to think of something again. He sighed softly and got on his carriage outside the palace gate. He was Chu Liuchen's uncle, but he seemed to sigh for Chu Luchen. If he had to sigh for something, it would be Chu Liuchen's life experience, which corresponded with his gloomy face before. It was normal for him to think of his brother who died early when he saw his nephew getting married. If someone would suspect something, he would definitely suspect Chu Luchen. Although the identity of the former emperor's legitimate son was not mentioned now, it did not mean that no one cared about it, especially the one in the palace now. Prince Cheng did not believe that the emperor really did not care about Chu Liuchen's identity. Xiao Wenru's bridal sedan chair moved forward, followed by 128 carriages of dowry, each of which was full. The first one was awarded by the Empress Dowager, then by the Emperor, and then by the Empress. Such a lineup was more prominent than that of Infanta Qinghua's marriage into Duke Xing's mansion. Many people were envious of Chu Luchen, who was like an orchid in front of her. Everyone in the capital city was sighing that the 5th Miss of Marquis Xing's mansion was so lucky to have such a husband. The bridal sedan finally stopped at the gate of Prince Chen's mansion after traveling through most of the capital city. The gate of Prince Chen's mansion, which had always been deserted, was very lively today. The emperor specially mentioned Chu Liuchen's marriage and invited all the ministers to attend the wedding banquet as the elder of the groom. Since the emperor had said so, who dared not to come? Of course, those who did not have a high status could only send a gift, and they could not enter. Those who came were all aristocratic families and high-ranking officials. There was no female master in Prince Chen's mansion. The Empress Dowager specially sent her 2 nannies to take charge of the wedding banquet to entertain the madams and misses from various mansions. With the Empress Dowager's servants holding the fort inside, everything in the inner courtyard was arranged in an orderly manner. Bridal sedan chair. After landing, Xiao Wanru waited at the door of the bridal sedan chair for a long time. She moved her feet uneasily in the bridal sedan chair. She did not understand why Chu Luchen waited for such a long time when he should be in front of her bridal sedan chair at this time. While thinking, she suddenly felt the bridal sedan chair shake. She immediately reached out and pressed the sedan chair pillar on one side to stabilize herself. Then the sedan chair shook twice, and the crowd outside cheered loudly. It should be Chu Luchen's last 3 arrows. Someone lifted the curtain of the sedan chair, put one end of a red ribbon in her hand, and the other end in Chu Luchen's hand. Chu Luchen led Xiao Wanru across the brazier and then entered the high hall. In the high hall, there was a matron of honor waiting. When they came over, it was just the auspicious time for the newlyweds to bow. Hearing the noise in her ears, Xiao Wanru was inexplicably confused. In her last life, when Shichi got married, when Shichi had been too sick to get up, and his elder brother took the place of the wedding ceremony. At that time, the noise outside was also so noisy. She inexplicably panicked and moved her feet uneasily. Her hand holding the red ribbon was held by a big hand, and she heard Chu Luchen's elegant voice in her ears, "Don't panic." She stopped and took a deep breath. The warm touch in her hand told her that this life was not the last life. No one bowed on her behalf, and it was really Chu Luchen. She lowered her watery eyes and saw a pair of thin boots with golden lines and dragon patterns under the veil. The patterns were in the shape of waves, but they were inlaid with gold edges, which could not be worn by ordinary people. Therefore, she was really getting married. The matron of honor was already shouting, "Bow to heaven and earth." Xiao Wanru reacted a little slower, and then she sensed that the pair of big hands gently led her in a direction. She lowered her head and saw someone in the crowd laughing. Prince Chen seems to really like the bride. He must like her, otherwise he wouldn't welcome her in person. She's lucky. The voice was not loud, and it must be because Chu Luchen gently pointed her in a direction just now. Her cheeks under the veil turned pink. She bit her lip, and her eyes became more and more misty. Then she slightly raised the corners of her mouth. When Shichi stood behind a group of guests and watched Chu Luchen lead Xiao Wanru to bow and Chu Luchen reach out to guide Xiao Wanru. Although he only moved slightly, he could often lead Xiao Wanru in a direction. When Shichi frowned and felt inexplicably uncomfortable. There seemed to be something pressing on his heart, which was very thick and heavy, so heavy that he almost felt out of breath. There had never been such a scene in his dream, but he inexplicably felt that there should be such a scene. But what was wrong? Why was it like this? Under the guidance of Chu Luchen, the bride under the red veil bowed to the heaven and earth to get married with him. Her silent trust in Chu Luchen could be felt even through the red veil. The dazzling red almost burned his sight, and the complexity in his eyes finally condensed into a deep sorrow. Whether the woman in his memory was Xiao Wanru or not, he seemed to have missed her. If there was a previous life, did it mean that he had missed Xiao Wanru in this life? He clenched his hands tightly and his lips turned pale. If his dream in the past was as clear as it was now, would he desperately propose to Xiao Wanru? Then was she his bride at this moment? Wrong? This thought had never occurred to his mind before, but at this time, it was so strong and scorching that he couldn't ignore it. Even if he wanted to ignore it, he couldn't. He even had an impulse to directly pull her away in the auditorium. At this moment, it had never been so clear to him that he wanted Xiao Wanru. Whether it was the one in his dream or the one in front of him, it seemed that they should all be his. He believed that there was a previous life and this life. But he clearly realized that he was too late. He hated this feeling, but he really felt it. "Yuan Qing, do you feel uncomfortable?" Chu Liyue's voice came into his ears. Suppressing the rolling regret in his heart, when Shichi slowly relaxed his clenched hands and said, "I'm fine. I just feel a little uncomfortable. Maybe it's because there are too many people, so I made a fuss." "Then let's go out for a walk," Chu Liyue said calmly. He said with a smile. When Shichi looked up at him and immediately noticed that Chu Luiyue smiled involuntarily. They had known each other for a long time, so how could he not see the stiffness of Chu Luiyue's smile? He calmly glanced at Chu Luchen, who was saluting, nodded and strode out. At this moment, everyone was paying attention to Chu Luchen's salute, so they didn't see them walk out. Soon, they walked out of the wedding hall where the salute was held. Yuan Qing, let's go over there. There are fewer people there and it's quieter. Chu Luiyue smiled and pointed to a door on the right, which was the door leading to the inner courtyard. Chu Luiyue had been here several times, so he was very familiar with it. There was no mistress in Prince Chen's mansion now, so Chu Luchen lived alone in the so-called inner courtyard. It didn't matter if he offended anyone or not. When Shichi nodded, and the two of them turned around the moon cave gate. Yuan Qing, what do you think of third brother's health? Both of them seemed to have something on their minds. After walking quietly for a while, Chu Luiyue broke the silence and asked, Prince Chen seems to be in good health. When Shichi said calmly, You think so too? I think so too. But can third brother's illness of congenital fetal poison be cured so easily? Chu Luiyue didn't believe it and said. Chu Luiyue found that Chu Luchen was in good spirits and was healthy in all aspects, which made Chu Luiyue feel very strange. He had asked many people to see Chu Luchen before, but now it seemed that Chu Luchen was really fine. However, several imperial physicians of the Imperial Institute of Medicine shook their heads and said that Chu Luchen couldn't recover. How could he really get better? Your Highness, have you checked the medical records? When Shichi said lightly, I have, but I can't find out what happened later. Now that Chu Luiyue regarded When Shichi as his confidant, he didn't hide some things from him. Since When Shichi helped him deal with Xiao Wanru, When Shichi was on Chu Luiyue's side. He almost killed Xiao Wanru as a bane. At that time, Chu Luiyue also felt very sorry that he didn't help Xiao Yenru. Now thinking of it, he felt lucky. Fortunately, Xiao Wanru was fine. This feeling also made him very uncomfortable with the joyous scene at present, but he just suppressed these discomforts to the bottom of his heart. When he waited for the position in the future, it would be easy for him to get Princess Chen. With Chu Liuchen's health, it should not be difficult for him to die of illness. But now he had new doubts, so he took When Shichi out for a walk and asked When Shichi to give him advice. Chapter 882. Remember in 1 second, 800 $say, net wonderful pop-up window free reading. Your Highness, can you check the previous medical cases? When Shichi asked with a frown. It's still okay in the past. Although it's not convenient for me to check, I saw some of it when he was in the Imperial Hospital to recuperate. They all said that third brother isn't well. Chu Luiyue was talking about the time when he and Chu Liuxin were injured and stayed in the Imperial Institute of Medicine to recuperate. During that time, he did not only recuperate but also did other things, such as secretly checking Chu Liuchen's medical records. He could not check such medical records casually. If his father knew it, he would be reprimanded again. Chu Luiyue even thought that his father would not let him off easily if he found out that he had checked Chu Liuchen's medical records. It wasn't so easy to investigate in the past, but Your Highness still found it. Now there's nothing you can find. Does Your Highness think that Prince Qin is in good health? When Shichi asked back. This was indeed what Chu Luiyue was worried about. He didn't hide it from When Shichi. He nodded and sighed heavily. Yuan Qing, third brother seems to be in good health now. What do you think? Chu Luchen, who had just performed the wedding ceremony, looked really good. The 3 arrows that were shot at the door of the bridal sedan chair were also very stable. Except that his face and lips looked a little paler than ordinary people, Chu Luiyue felt that Chu Luchen seemed to be completely fine now. If this was the case, would Chu Luchen be one of the people he had to deal with? Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue frowned tightly. It was difficult for him to deal with Chu Liuzhou, not to mention Prince Cheng. Now it would be great if Chu Luchen could also be his opponent. Moreover, there was also Xiao Wanru. Such a beauty seemed to suit his taste. She was as gorgeous as a peony and as elegant as an orchid. Her every move was beautiful and suited his taste. Originally, he thought that Xiao Wanru was still young, so he was not in a hurry. He didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would be the first to get married. This feeling was very uncomfortable, as if the person he had been sure of had become a victim. If he had known this, he would not have cared too much and directly asked his father for a marriage. Prince Chen does look good, but whether he is really good or not depends on tonight. When Shichi forcefully suppressed the annoyance in his heart and analyzed lightly. Chu Luiwei was silent at first, and then immediately understood. He nodded and said, Yuan Qing is right. It depends on tonight. He stood still and turned his gaze towards the direction of the wedding hall. At this time, the ceremony should have already been completed. But even if the ceremony was successful, so what? He was just a sickly child. Could he really do it? Thinking of this, he felt a little relieved. Even if Chu Luchen seemed to be fine, Chu Luiwei always felt that it was unlikely that he had really recovered. How could a sick person who was on the verge of death recover just like that? Over the past 10 years, many imperial physicians and famous doctors from outside had been unable to do anything about Chu Liuchen's health. How could he recover at this time? He believed that Chu Luchen was at the end of his tether and was showing it in front of others. After the ceremony, Xiao Wanru was helped into the bridal chamber. A large group of people were waiting to see the bride. Chu Luchen lifted the red veil. Xiao Wanru looked up at him with her heart beating like a drum and blushed immediately. He lowered his head with a gloomy face. The bride is so beautiful. How beautiful! So beautiful! Exclamations came from all directions, and Xiao Wanru blushed more and more. She lowered her head and did not dare to look at his beautiful eyes. Just now, she saw his handsome face, which not only made her feel at ease, but also made her feel inexplicably shy. Biting her lips, she lowered her head and looked at the red carpet beneath her feet. Your Highness, if you are hungry, let her have it first. Chu Luchen smiled slightly and ordered the nanny beside him. The nanny in the palace nodded and received the madams and misses in the bridal chamber with a smile. Chu Luchen turned around and walked out. At this time, as the bridegroom, he must go out. However, he had always been in poor health, so no one dared to force him to drink at the wedding banquet. The incident at the wedding banquet of Marquis Xing's mansion had been settled, so no one dared to make any trouble. Everyone turned a blind eye to the way the bridegroom substituted tea for wine, as if what the bridegroom drank was wine. Chu Luiwei and Chu Liuzhou did not drink wine either. When they came to Prince Chen's mansion before, they had been warned by the emperor that they were not allowed to drink wine this time. Prince Xian, on the other hand, drank alone and was half drunk. Before Chu Luchen came over, he was already drunk. Chu Luiwei asked someone to help him down to have a rest. After walking around, Chu Luchen left with the help of a little eunuch. Everyone thought that Prince Chen looked pale and should be unable to hold on. Originally, everyone had doubts about Prince Chen's health. Seeing that he was so tired that he kept rubbing between his eyebrows and his face seemed to be getting paler, no one dared to hold him anymore. At the same time, they felt relieved. Prince Chen was indeed strong in appearance but weak in reality. He couldn't hold on in such a short time. In the bridal chamber, Xiao Wanru looked at Chu Luchen, who had just gone out not long ago, in astonishment. No matter how she looked at it, he just walked around casually. Several madams and misses, who had stayed in the bridal chamber to watch the fun, had to leave one by one because Chu Luchen returned early. Why are you so fast? Xiao Wanru looked around and asked in astonishment. I finished my toast and I'm also drunk. Chu Luchen said lazily, and then sat down beside Xiao Wanru. He turned his face to look at Xiao Wanru with leisurely eyes. It was really speechless for a person who didn't smell of alcohol to say that he was drunk. Go and take a bath first. I'm drunk, so I'll lie down for a while. Chu Luchen waved his hand, fell on the bed and said lazily. Xiao Wanru had felt uncomfortable and wanted to take a bath for a long time. Originally, she wanted to wait for those madams and misses to leave, but she didn't expect Chu Luchen to come so soon. Hearing his words, she immediately stood up. Yujie and Chu Lu came over to help her remove the heavy headdress on her head and then helped her to the bathroom on the side. The bathroom was very spacious, steaming hot, and there was a faint fragrance flowing out, which was very pleasant. Xiao Wanru looked at the spacious bathroom in astonishment. The pool was made of warm jade, which was extremely luxurious. There was also a soft cushion on the side of the bathtub, which was separated by half of a screen. It inexplicably made her feel nervous. Miss. Noticing her abnormality, Yujie called her in a low voice. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Wanru slowly calmed down. With a blush on her face, she took off her clothes with the help of 2 servant girls, slid into the pool from the jade platform on the side, and waved her hand to let the 2 servant girls go out. She got up early this morning, so her body was still stiff. Soaking in the warm water, she relaxed all over. Miss, I'm worried about you in there alone. Yujie walked to the door, stopped and said, I'm fine. Xiao Wanru waved her hand and motioned for Yujie to go out. For some reason, she wanted to stay alone for a while. Seeing that she insisted, Yujie could only leave and said, Miss, I'll wait for you at the door. If there's anything, just call me. Xiao Wanru nodded in response. Hearing the footsteps of the 2 servant girls, the room suddenly became quiet. Leaning against the side of the bathtub, she slowly closed her eyes. Everything just now was like a dream, which made her feel unreal. Previous life, this life, was the previous life a dream of this life, or was this life a continuation of the previous life? It was really a little unclear. The exquisite huaxing inexplicably flashed in front of her eyes, and she took a deep breath. That huaxing belonged to Chu Luchen. So, in the previous life, did she also know Chu Luchen because of this huaxing? Or did Chu Luchen also know her because of this huaxing? Xiao Wanru felt that she had remembered everything about others, but she couldn't remember anything about Chu Luchen. She reached out to rub her eyebrows, and more guesses in her heart. Now she was almost sure that she had known Chu Luchen in the previous life, and even the relationship between them was not shallow. But why was there only the simplest scene in her memory about Chu Luchen, and there was no scene of her getting along with him? It seemed that everything about Chu Luchen was hidden behind thick clouds. Why was it like this? Why was everything about Chu Luchen erased, while she remembered other people and things very clearly? It was very strange, so strange that it made her feel uneasy. Was that pair of eyes with hostility and despair also Chu Luchen's? Why was he like this? Her heart beat heavily, and it hurt very much, as if something had pulled some old things, but she couldn't remember it no matter how hard she tried. Her willowy eyebrows became more and more tightly knitted. Why was it like this? It was obvious that she had been reborn. Why was everything about Chu Luchen like looking at flowers in the fog? She could only rely on imagination and speculation. What had happened in the previous life, or what had she forgotten? Why did she forget everything about Chu Luchen? Those things should be very important. The fragmented scenes of her 2 lives appeared in front of her, but no matter important or unimportant, there was no figure of Chu Luchen. Moreover, many places that could be clearly connected were often broken, as if the memory about those things had been dug out by something. Why did she forget these things? Did she do something, or did Chu Luchen do something? That huaxing, that exquisite huaxing, opened another memory of Xiao Wanru, but now her memory seemed to be still in the fog. She could clearly sense it, but why did she still not understand it? She reached out to rub her eyebrows again, and suddenly heard an elegant voice in her ear. What's wrong? Is there anything bothering you? Chapter 883. Remember in 1 second, 800 $say, net wonderful pop-up window free reading. She opened her eyes in astonishment and met Chu Liuchen's eyes. Seeing the light bathrobe on his body, Xiao Wanru blushed and involuntarily curled up in the water. Why are you here? Why didn't I come? Could it be that I'm not allowed to take a bath after you've taken a bath? Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows, and his handsome face looked even more handsome in the mist. Didn't you say that you were tired? Xiao Wanru stammered with a red face. This king is tired, but I'm not so tired that I can't even take a bath. Chu Luchen threw away his bathrobe and got into the bath. Xiao Wanru didn't even dare to look at him at this moment. She fluttered her long eyelashes and closed her eyes directly. But in the next moment, her body fell into a strong embrace. Your Highness. Xiao Wanru panicked and struggled helplessly. Don't be afraid, I'm just taking a bath. Of course, If you continue to struggle like this, I can't guarantee anything. Chu Luchen lowered his head, looked at the blushing face in his arms, and laughed. Xiao Wanru didn't dare to move at all. She was stiff in Chu Luchen's arms. Chu Luchen had hugged her like this in the past, but the two of them were separated by clothes. Now they were like this, so Xiao Wanru didn't dare to move. She could only let him hold her, and her heart was about to jump out. Xiao Wanru looked at the obedient girl in her arms. Under the turbulence of the pool, the girl's exquisite figure was still very attractive. Even though Xiao Wanru held her body tightly, she was still very attractive. Chu Luchen suddenly pushed Xiao Wanru slightly away and said seriously, "You are too close." Xiao Wanru didn't know what to say. Could he be more like a thief shouting to catch a thief? He was the one who pulled her over, but now he was complaining that she was too close. Although Chu Luchen said so, he still held Xiao Wanru in his arms. The fragrance of the girl in his arms rose with the warm mist, making people feel more and more attracted. The next moment, he kissed Xiao Wanru heavily without much pity. He held Xiao Wanru tightly with his slender fingers and made her stick more closely to him. In her 2 lives, Xiao Wanru had never been violated like this. She just struggled subconsciously and was kissed dizzy. Her nasal voice was full of Chu Liuchen's breath, and then her body softened. For a long time, Xiao Wanru almost thought that she was going to die here. Finally, Chu Luchen let go of her and kissed her fiercely as if to devour her. "You go over there. It's not good for 2 people to bathe together." Chu Luchen pointed in a direction. Almost at the moment when Xiao Wanru came to her senses, she immediately swam in the other direction of the bathing pool. The strong breath of a man almost made her unable to think. She only felt that her whole body had turned red and her breath had been unstable. Of course, Chu Luchen seemed to be more unstable. Even though they were in the bath, she could feel his heavy breath. Xiao Wanru blushed more and more and almost buried her whole body in the water. "What do you think of this bath?" After a long while, she heard Chu Liuchen's calm voice and asked with a smile through the fog. "Very, very good." Xiao Wanru had not recovered from her shyness and could not respond to him normally. "This king had someone specially build it for you," Chu Luchen said with a smile and leaned to one side. His eyes fell on Xiao Wanru's slender body through the fog. He almost lost his self-control, which he was proud of. Originally, he thought that he could completely deal with the scene in front of him. The corners of his mouth curved silently. If it weren't for her body, he actually didn't have to bear it at all. Xiao Wanru's whole face was still as red as boiling. She didn't dare to look in Chu Liuchen's direction and said, Thank you, Your Highness." "Your Highness, have you finished bathing?" Xiao Wanru bit her lip and asked again with a red face. In fact, she was more willing to put on her clothes and talk to him. "There's no hurry. Let's bathe for a while. Zhuozhua, if you think it's done, you can go up first." Chu Luchen said lazily and deliberately looked at Xiao Wanru and said. Xiao Wanru didn't dare to imagine what it would be like to get up naked in front of him. She shrank her body in the water again, as if this could reduce her shyness. "I'll bathe again." Chu Liuchen's laughter came from the opposite side. It sounded like he was in a good mood, which was magnified by the empty bathroom. It seemed that her ears were full of his voice. "Well, Your Highness, you can bathe with me. Take your time. I'm not in a hurry." Xiao Wanru actually wanted to say that she was in a hurry, but no matter how anxious and bold she was, she didn't dare to get up in front of Chu Luchen. She knew that Chu Luchen did it on purpose, but she couldn't do anything to him. This person was so bad. "Your Highness, you just came back from outside. You can't bathe for too long." Xiao Wanru bit her lip and felt that it was better to save herself. "Why not? I'm not in good health and I need to bathe for more time." Chu Luchen said naturally. "Your Highness is not in good health. The medical books say that you can't bathe for too long," Xiao Wanru hurriedly suggested. The current situation was too embarrassing, and she just wanted to help him out. Except for the current embarrassing situation. It's better to have no books than to believe all the books. "Zhuozhua, do you think it's true?" Chu Luchen said with interest, and the smile on his lips became wider and wider. He looked at her through the mist, and Xiao Wanru immediately blushed again. In fact, she really wanted to get up and leave, but in the end she didn't have the courage. Your Highness, you really can't bathe for too long. She coughed loudly and tried her best to put on a serious expression. However, her delicate, crimson face made her serious expression lose its original meaning. She looked all the more adorable. Joie, you are really considerate of me, Chu Luchen said with an increasingly charming smile. Yes, she was very charming. She was no longer as elegant as Jade, but had a kind of strong beauty. Her once pale face was steamed by the water vapor, and it immediately turned into a delicate red, and her handsome face was like a peach blossom. The palm-sized face opposite her became more and more like a blooming flower. Her delicate and beautiful facial features were looming behind the mist, and she looked more like a goddess from the ninth heaven who fell into the mortal world. Chu Luchen felt that he had overestimated his self-control again, so he closed his eyes. Don't worry. You are still young and I won't touch you. I've asked about it. It's better for a girl to have sexual intercourse after she reaches the marriageable age. Otherwise, it will be harmful to her health. He said slowly in a low voice. When Xiao Wanru heard his voice, she blushed again. But. She stammered and didn't know what to say. Chu Luchen laughed and stood up. Xiao Wanru turned around in a hurry and turned her head to the other side. Then she heard the sound of Chu Luchen coming out of the bathing pool. She breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She couldn't get up until he left. Unexpectedly, she fell into a bathrobe. She was pulled up and fell heavily into Chu Liuchen's arms. She heard Chu Liuchen's chuckle, "Don't move. I'll take you back." Xiao Wanru didn't dare to move at once. She even reached out to pull Chu Liuchen's bathrobe in a hurry. It was also quiet outside the bathroom, and there was no one around. When she fell onto the bed, Xiao Wanru looked around the room with a blush and found that there was no one around. Everyone had already left. She breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. In both of her lives, she had always been a well-behaved girl and had never done such an outrageous thing. The gauze curtain fell, and another set of clothes was thrown in. It was her nightgown. It was very transparent outside the gauze curtain. Xiao Wanru hurriedly took off her bathrobe and put on her nightgown. Then she breathed a sigh of relief. Done? Chu Liuchen's gentle voice came from outside the gauze curtain. Xiao Wanru nodded subconsciously. She suddenly remembered that he couldn't see it from outside the gauze curtain, so she answered in a low voice. Chu Luchen lifted the gauze curtain and threw the bathrobe she had just taken off onto the screen. He had also changed into his pajamas and sat at the head of the bed. He said to her naturally, "Dry my hair for me." A dry handkerchief also fell into her hand. "Doesn't your Highness allow anyone to serve you?" Xiao Wanru took the handkerchief, stirred his wet hair, and asked curiously. Although her face was still as red as blood, she inexplicably felt at ease because of his previous words. From the bottom of her heart, she believed what Chu Luchen said. "I don't want anyone to serve me. I just want my princess to serve me," Chu Luchen said with a low smile in a clear and charming voice. Even though she knew that he couldn't see her, Xiao Wanru blushed. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, and she didn't know what to say for a moment. "I also have a princess now. How can I let others be so close to me? I'll have to trouble you in the future." Chu Luchen didn't seem to need Xiao Wanru's response. He said, "Joie and I are childhood sweethearts. Of course, it can't be compared with other people's blind marriage." He spoke as if the two of them had an affair since a long time ago. Xiao Wanru couldn't help loosening her hand that was twirling her hair. She was a little ashamed and annoyed, but she didn't know what to say. She had long known that Chu Luchen was shameless. If she continued to talk with him now, she might say something shameful later. But if she didn't go along with him, he could actually say something more shameful. "Your Highness, why did you stop in front of the bridal sedan chair just now?" Xiao Wanru blushed and felt that it was better to talk about business. "Did you sense it just now?" Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows. "Yes, but what happened?" Xiao Wanru thought of the scene just now and became curious. Sure enough, when talking about business, her words became much more natural, and she no longer felt ashamed and annoyed just now. "It's not a big deal. It's just that the bow I used to shoot the arrow broke." Chu Luchun said indifferently. How could it be possible? Xiao Wanru said in surprise. This kind of bow was not a good bow. How could it be broken? Moreover, this bow was not that meaningful, so it was useless to break it. Do you think it's not a big deal? Chu Luchun asked slowly as if he had eyes on the back of his head. Is there a cause and effect? Xiao Wanru thought for a moment and said softly. Suddenly, she thought of what would happen if the bow broke. She felt a chill on her back. In fact, there were disadvantages if the bow broke. Chapter 884. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign /say, net wonderful pop-up window free reading. But she was different. Xiao Yanru had once said that she was a bane. Although she beat the emperor at her own game and made him angry and ordered him to stop talking about it, this matter had been spread and many people had heard it. Perhaps everyone didn't take it seriously. But after all, this matter had been spread out and many people had heard of it. Perhaps everyone felt that it was not a big deal. After all, at that time, he had used a little too much strength, and some inappropriate things were all pushed to him, which made the emperor angry. Who did it? Xiao Wanru stopped for a moment. When the Imperial Palace gave it to me, it was tampered with. I have already asked someone to send it to the emperor. Chu Luchun said lazily. They were planning to burn the fire into the palace. Did many people see it? Xiao Wanru frowned slightly and gently moved Chu Luchun's hair aside. Don't worry. No one noticed it except me. I knew there was something wrong with the bow as soon as I pulled it, so I asked someone to change it. The bow was only a little broken, not completely broken. Chu Luchun said with a smile. Hearing his words, Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. If no one noticed it, there would be no rumors. Chu Luchun was already full of troubles. If she was asked to bring more troubles, it would be more unpleasant to hear. Just now, when I bowed to my parents, why did I bow more? After this worry was solved, she thought of what had happened just now again. With the red veil over her head, she bowed one more time in the process of bowing to her parents, which made her a little flustered for a while. Fortunately, with Chu Luchun's guidance, she didn't make any mistakes. I am also one of the princes, so I bowed to my uncle. Chu Luchun said with an ambiguous look in his eyes. Xiao Wanru couldn't see his face, but she could hear his voice. There was some sarcasm in his voice. She knew that it reminded him of his family background. Originally, he was the son of the former emperor, which was the same as Commandery Prince Qing. He shouldn't be one of the emperor's sons. However, with the emperor's grace, he became the current third prince. This should make Chu Luchun very uncomfortable, right? He was originally an uncle, but he had to call himself a son. It must remind him of his identity. He didn't know whether it was the emperor's idea or the empress dowager's idea. Wasn't it constantly reminding him of his identity? Then, how should we deal with them in the future? Although Xiao Wanru knew that this matter might be a taboo for Chu Luchun, she still asked carefully and softly. She married Chu Luchun, so she had to pay attention to everything related to the royal family. She couldn't avoid it easily. She needed Chu Luchun's attitude toward everything related to the royal family, and she had to cooperate with him no matter what. There's no need for you to do anything. Just do what you want to do. Sensing that his hair was almost dry, Chu Luchun turned around and walked to the door to call someone. Yu Jie answered and came in. She helped Xiao Wanru sit down at the dressing table and dried her hair. The room was very quiet except for the sound of Yu Jie cleaning the water stains on her hair. Xiao Wanru looked at the big bed behind her through the mirror on the dresser. Chu Luchun reclined casually on the big bed, holding a book in his hand and quietly reading. Finally, Yu Jie dried her hair and left quietly. Sensing that the blush on her face could not subside for a while, Xiao Wanru lowered her head and fluttered her long eyelashes twice. She really felt embarrassed to go over. When she was looking at her fingers in a daze, she suddenly felt an arm around her waist. He reached out to hold her slender waist and said, "Why don't you come over and have a rest? Is there something good to see that makes my princess so absorbed?" The man's breath came over intimately, making her heat, which had subdued, rush up again. She bit her lip and got up according to his gesture. She was held tightly in Chu Liuchen's arms and slowly walked into the bed. When they arrived at the bedside, Xiao Wanru hurriedly got up and went into the bed. She was supposed to sleep with the man inside and the woman outside, but she couldn't care about it now. Her heart beat faster uncontrollably, and her fingers even spasmed a little. After being reborn, her heart was much harder and steadier than in the previous life. But she didn't expect that she would still be so flustered, as if her heart was about to jump out of her chest. Especially under Chu Liuchen's burning gaze, she was almost at a loss. She had never experienced such a scene in her 2 lives. The wedding in the previous life was like this. She entered Wen Shiqi's room. Wen Shiqi's room, which was not changed at all when he was ill. There was only a happiness character on the door, indicating that today was a happy day and nothing else. When she came over, Wen Shiqi was lying on the bed, looking extremely weak. The servants in the room all took care of Wen Shiqi, and no one cared about a bride who came to the wedding. On the night of the wedding, after everyone left, she sat silently on the side, guarding Wen Shiqi, who was lying on the bed and fell asleep after taking medicine. No one cared about her identity as a newlywed, so of course, she was not in a daze now. After that, they set up a bed for her in the room so that she could take care of Wen Shiqi. Xiao Wanru was pulled heavily and fell into a broad embrace. For the first time, Xiao Wanru clearly realized that Chu Liuchen looked extremely thin, as if he were sick, but in fact he was not so thin. He was still very fat. Under the thin gauze curtain, Chu Liuchen held Xiao Wanru in his arms and leaned against the cushion at the head of the bed. Their breaths were intertwined, and under the cover of the bed curtain, they felt particularly intimate. Xiao Wanru didn't know what to say at this time. She leaned against Chu Liuchen's shoulder and felt that the breath of the person beside her was very strong, which was not as elegant as he was in front of others. Hearing his heavy breathing, Xiao Wanru unconsciously breathed heavily. She held the corner of her clothes tightly with her hands and felt that her palms were sweaty. Chu Liuchen suddenly laughed in a low voice and said, "I really don't think it's possible." "Why not?" Xiao Wanru asked subconsciously. "I have asked several imperial physicians before, and they all said that you are not of marriageable age and can't have sex. But now I can't bear it anymore. What should I do?" Chu Liuchen squinted his eyes, looked at Xiao Wanru and said. The petite girl leaned on his arm. She was very light and very soft, which stirred up the feelings in his heart. A pair of bright and beautiful eyes looked at him under the gauze curtain, becoming more and more charming. They had not seen each other for a few years, but this girl was becoming more and more like him. The corners of his lips curled up. He lifted his body and gently kissed the corner of her pink and tender lips. Then he thought for a while and didn't make waves in the end. He had never cared about any other woman, and he had never thought that he would lose his mind, let alone think that there was something wrong with his self-control. But now Chu Liuchen repeatedly felt that he had overestimated himself. Xiao Wanru didn't expect that Chu Liuchen would talk to her about this seriously. For a moment she was moved and shy. She didn't know where to look. Sensing his gentle and pitiful kiss, she bit her lip and looked up at Chu Liuchen at a loss. Her blank look almost made Chu Liuchen's tense heart burst. "Do you think the imperial physicians might have made a mistake?" Chu Liuchen said with a serious look. Xiao Wanru hurriedly turned her head shyly. This person was really shameless. He actually asked the imperial physicians about this kind of thing, and he asked more than one imperial physician. How could he have the face to ask them? He was Prince Jin. How could he have the face to say that? "Zhuozhuo, do you think the imperial physicians made a mistake?" Chu Liuchen seemed to be determined to get an answer from her, so he asked again. "Your Highness." Xiao Wanru was too ashamed to answer such a question. What was going on? Not only did he embarrass himself, but he also wanted to embarrass himself. "Alas, if I had known this, I could have married her later." Chu Liuchen sighed and his eyes fell on her petite body. She really didn't conform to his wishes. She almost grew up according to his wishes. There was actually such a good girl in the world, and now he really married her. This made Chu Liuchen, who had always been calm, have a lot of romantic thoughts in his heart. He couldn't help sighing to himself again, "Why don't you grow up quickly?" His words made Xiao Wanru unable to listen to him, and it greatly refreshed her feelings. Wasn't Prince Chen supposed to be temperamental and cold? Why did he become so childish just because of a disagreement? Was he still the future crown prince who stood on the high steps with a face full of hostility in her memory? Each sentence he said was more childish than the previous one, and each sentence made her blush. The meaning of his words did not change, and he kept dragging her to the place where she blushed. She stiffened her body and didn't dare to move. She felt that her whole body was about to burn as if she were steamed in a cage. Her body was held tightly by him, and she tried hard to push him away. Her hand fell into Chu Liuchen's big hand. "You don't want to?" Chu Liuchen said in a surprised voice. The meaning in his words, together with the previous words, seemed to have a different meaning. "Your Highness, loosen up a little. I'm hot," Xiao Wanru said anxiously. Such specious words were easy to be misunderstood, especially at this time. She didn't want Chu Liuchen to think that she had agreed to anything. "You're hot." Chu Liuchen slightly loosened his hand. Xiao Wanru hurriedly turned inside and stayed away from him. Fortunately, the bed was big enough, so she didn't hit the wall. "I'm hot." Xiao Wanru lowered her head and said, "It happens that I'm cold. You can help me warm my feet." Chu Liuchen said naturally. He didn't blush or panic when he said those words. Xiao Wanru really wanted to roll her eyes hard. Others didn't know how hot his body was just now, but she knew it clearly. Now he even had the face to say that he was cold. She couldn't help but shrink back. Fortunately, Chu Liuchen didn't reach out his hand forcefully this time. Instead, he behaved himself and lay down. Then he pointed to the side and said, "It's getting late. You should also lie down." Seeing that he didn't reach out his hand again, Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief and lay down obediently. As long as Chu Liuchen didn't reach out his hand, everything could be discussed. He also said that it was not the right time. Although she sensed that he seemed to be burning just now, she inexplicably believed his words and knew that he would be fine tonight. Glancing at his handsome face, she felt sweet and soft in her heart. Chapter 885. The air was inexplicably quiet, but it was not strange. There was a sense of tranquility and peace. Their breathing gradually calmed down. Xiao Wanru closed her eyes slightly. In fact, she wanted to sleep very much, but she couldn't. After thinking for a while, her long eyelashes fluttered twice and she opened her eyes. "Your Highness, can you tell me something about the mansion?" "What?" Chu Liuchen teased with his eyes closed. Xiao Wanru hesitated for a moment, but finally said bluntly, "Tell me about the mansion and the palace." Chu Liuchen's situation was special. Prince Chen's mansion was the so-called Nangong, which was similar to the East Palace. It was connected to the Imperial Palace. If one went out of the side door, he could directly go to the Imperial Palace. Such a location represented not only geographical but also psychological. After marrying into Prince Chen's mansion, she would inevitably deal with the Imperial Palace. "You just need to be Prince Chen's mansion and do as you see fit," Chu Liuchen said casually. Although he didn't get close to her again, he reached out to hold Xiao Wanru's soft hand and pinched it gently. His face darkened. "If someone shows kindness to you, don't care. It's like this in the Imperial Palace. No one can tell whether it's a person or a ghost." His words were a little inexplicable and even abrupt, but Xiao Wanru inexplicably felt a little sad. She subconsciously reached out to hold Chu Liuchen's hand, and her eyes became soft. "I'll listen to you, Your Highness. Since you'll listen to me, that's good." Chu Liuchen reached out to hold Xiao Wanru in his arms and said seriously. Of course, only his face was serious. The next morning, Xiao Wanru woke up with soreness all over her body. When she opened her eyes, she didn't know where she was for a moment. She only felt that her whole body seemed to be imprisoned and couldn't move even if she wanted to. She looked up and saw Chu Liuchen's handsome face right in front of her own. He was so handsome and elegant that anyone who saw him would have to praise him as the god's favorite. With such a delicate face, coupled with his loose long hair, it was hard to tell whether he was a man or a woman. She almost suspected that he was a man in a painting who had fallen into the world. But when she thought of what he had done last night, other than not doing it to the end, he had done all kinds of shameless things. For a moment, her whole body was burning red. If it were not for last night, she would never have known that Chu Luchan, who was as handsome as an immortal, would do such a shameless thing. "You're awake?" Chu Luchan opened his eyes and said with a gentle smile. He kissed her on the forehead. Seeing him open his eyes, Xiao Wanru suddenly closed her watery eyes and her heart beat wildly. "Sleeping again?" Chu Luchan said with a smile. Looking at her slightly trembling eyelashes, he gently patted her back and said, "Then you can sleep for a while." "I'm awake." Xiao Wanru hurriedly opened her eyes. They still had to go to the palace to visit the emperor and the empress dowager. How could she be so willful? What would others think of her? "Are you going to get up?" Chu Luchan smiled and looked at her, trying to pretend to be serious. "I have to." Xiao Wanru tried not to look at his handsome face with a teasing smile. "Okay, Zhuozhuo said you want to get up, so get up." Chu Luchan let go of her, got up first and then turned back to pull her. Xiao Wanru had already sat up by herself. She bit her lip and didn't look at his hand. "What's wrong? Are you really angry?" Chu Luchan turned his handsome face to her and asked with a smile. His sanctimonious look really made Xiao Wanru gnash her teeth. He looked very refreshed, but she felt uncomfortable all over. "But at most, I won't do this next time, okay?" Seeing her pink little face pouting slightly and looking unhappy, Chu Luchan whispered in her ear. His words made Xiao Wanru's little face turn redder. All her memories of the wedding night were that Madame D asked someone to give her a book of fire-avoiding pictures when she got married in the last life. Her words made Xiao Wanru's little face turn redder. All her memories of her wedding night were that Madame D asked someone to give her a fire-repelling painting when she got married in the last life. His words made Xiao Wanru's little face turn redder. All her memories of the wedding night were that Madame D asked someone to give her a book of fire-avoiding pictures when she got married in the last life. This time, although Ri and Great Elder Princess personally sent a set of exquisite fire-avoiding maps and specially instructed her to obey Chu Luchan, she felt so ashamed even though they didn't really have anything to do with each other. Chu Luchan didn't have other women around him. Not only were there rumors, but Xiao Xuanzi had also repeatedly mentioned it. However, he actually knew so much. How could Xiao Wanru not be angry and annoyed? She lowered her little head and felt ashamed to see others. Seeing Xiao Wanru's sullen little face and look aggrieved and annoyed, Chu Luchan smiled and his eyes became softer. He had always been indifferent and never took anyone seriously. In the past, he didn't even care about himself, so who else could he care about? But now he clearly knew that the person in front of him was the one he cared about the most. Since he knew it clearly, he was willing to do it. His eyes were deep in the place where Xiao Wanru couldn't see. Since he had what he wanted, he would definitely protect it. No one could spy on his woman. He had always been the most protective person. "Master, have you gotten up?" Hearing the movement inside, Xiao Xuanzi asked at the door. Behind him was a group of servant girls, holding all kinds of washing things in their hands. "Come in." Chu Luchan let go of Xiao Wanru and said lightly. The door was pushed open, and a group of servant girls and eunuchs came in, followed by Yu Jie and Chu Lu. They went to serve Xiao Wanru first. Although Xiao Wanru couldn't get rid of the blush on her face, she looked much calmer at this moment. The servant girls helped Xiao Wanru to dress up, and none of them approached Chu Luchan. However, the two little eunuchs brought by Xiao Xuanzi skillfully dressed Chu Luchan. At first glance, it could be seen that they used to serve Chu Luchan. After washing up, Xiao Wanru was helped to sit down in front of the dressing table. Chu Lu combed her long hair. The other servant girls in Prince Chen's mansion all left, leaving only Chu Lu and Yu Jie. Two nannies from the palace came in and bowed to Chu Luchan, who was sitting at the head of the bed. Chu Luchan nodded. A nanny went forward to turn over the messy quilt with a smile. Xiao Wanru looked at their movements through the dressing mirror. At first, she didn't understand what they meant. But when a nanny turned over a messy white handkerchief from the bed, she immediately blushed and didn't dare to look at it in the mirror. "Your Highness." Seeing the white wedding handkerchief without a trace of blood, the nanny in the palace changed her face and said in a panic, What's wrong? Is there a problem? Chu Luchen raised his eyes, which were elegant and gentle. The nanny shivered with fear, hurriedly lowered her head and said, I'm making a fuss. You can leave. Chu Luchen waved his hand indifferently. The two nannies didn't dare to stay any longer. They carefully put the wedding handkerchief in a brocade box and then left. When they arrived at the door, they looked at each other and their faces became very ugly. Last night, Prince Chen and Princess Chen didn't consummate their marriage. The Empress Dowager would be sad if she knew it. Let's go and report to the Empress Dowager first. Let's talk about it with the Empress Dowager. Another nanny suggested. It wasn't a good idea for the two of them to just stand here. They had no choice but to return to the Imperial Palace through the side door of Prince Chen's mansion and went directly to the Palace of Benevolent Peace to see the Empress Dowager. Prince Chen really didn't consummate his marriage? After hearing the report from the two nannies, the Empress Dowager's eyes turned red. Was her Prince Chen really in such poor health? Didn't he say that he was going to recover soon? He was no different from ordinary people. It seems that yes. The two nannies braced themselves and reported. You can leave. The Empress Dowager waved her hand. The two nannies breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly left. Is my Chen really not good? After the two old maids left, the Empress Dowager shed tears. She really felt sorry for her grandson. When she thought of his life experience, her heart ached so much that she couldn't describe it herself. This child was really pitiful. Empress Dowager, don't be sad. Maybe it's because His Highness has taken medicine before, so it's not convenient for him to consummate his marriage. Nanny Wei thought for a while and found a reason to comfort the Empress Dowager. He chose her himself, and the gift was also given by him. He even welcomed her in person when they got married. It can be seen that he is really satisfied with this little girl. But now, she is married but can't consummate their marriage. How pitiful my Chen is. The more the Empress Dowager thought about it, the sadder she became. Xiao Wanru and Chu Luchen were good, which was also the most important reason why the Empress Dowager wanted to grant them a marriage. As long as Chu Luchen liked it, the Empress Dowager was willing to fulfill it, let alone a woman. Since he could have a son and a daughter, at least he would have a descendant. Although Chu Luchen was much better, the Empress Dowager was still worried, for fear of seeing Chu Luchen pass out again. Empress Dowager, don't worry. Princess Chen and Prince Chen are still young. Maybe they will be better when they are older. At least this time, Prince Chen likes Princess Chen, which is already very good, and it is enough to let His Highness know that Empress Dowager loves him. Nanny Wei said again. The Empress Dowager nodded, wiped her tears with a handkerchief, and then sighed heavily. This child. I always feel that I owe him. If it weren't for that he is now. Her words were very vague, but Nanny Wei knew what she meant. She immediately comforted her. Empress Dowager, don't be sad. It's the greatest blessing that Prince Chen is in good health. You see, since the engagement for Prince Chen, His Highness has been getting better and better. He hasn't been sick for so long, and his behavior and expression are no different from ordinary people. It seems that he will only get better in the future. The late emperor had passed away, so it was useless to talk about this. The Empress Dowager's words were very pleasing to the ear. She nodded repeatedly and felt that what Nanny Wei said was very reasonable, so she stopped crying at once. After thinking for a while, she asked Nanny Wei to take out the gifts that she had prepared for the first meeting. When Princess Chen comes later, give them all to her. Empress Dowager, didn't you say that the gifts were too generous? Nanny Wei asked carefully. That was before, but now, as long as she serves Prince Chen well, she will do anything. The Empress Dowager sighed and said, her child was in poor health, and she also felt guilty for disrespecting Ru and great elder princess's family. Yes, I know. Nanny Wei knew the Empress Dowager's mind best, so she immediately nodded and agreed. The Empress Dowager's palace of benevolent and peaceful became peaceful, but the Emperor's imperial study was filled with hostility. The three princes standing in front of him didn't even dare to breathe loudly as they looked at the broken bow thrown down by the Emperor. Chapter 886. In fact, There were a lot of people in the imperial study. In addition to the palace servants, there were 3 princes, Prince Cheng and Commandery Prince Qing. Prince Cheng was sitting, while Commandery Prince Qing stood a little further away from the 3 princes. At this time, they all lowered their heads and dared not to answer. "Tell me whose idea this bow belongs to?" the emperor said angrily with a cold face. He slapped the imperial desk so hard that the bookshelf on the desk almost fell down. The bow was given by the emperor, but he didn't expect that the bow was so easily broken. Chu Luchun almost broke the bow in front of everyone and lost face. As long as he thought of this, the emperor was furious. "Brother, is it possible that Prince Qin used too much strength?" Prince Cheng began to smooth things over. "Used too much strength? Prince Qin used too much strength?" The emperor sneered and pointed at his sons who were standing. "Any of you may have used too much strength, but it is impossible for Prince Qin." His words made them speechless. If it was someone else, they could explain it in this way. But it was Chu Luchun, who had always been a victim of illness. It was rumored that he would not have it tomorrow. Even if they dared to hide it from their conscience, they were afraid that the emperor could not bear it and would punish them. Chu Liwei raised his head and said earnestly, "Father, I don't know anything." "Father, I don't know what is going on either. Someone must deliberately want to make trouble for third brother. Father, please punish him." Although Chu Liuzhou was reckless in the past, he was not stupid, so he hurriedly said, "Father, I didn't." Chu Liuxin looked a little dispirited and listless. Since what happened to Xiao Yanru, Chu Liuxin had always been in such a state. The emperor glanced at his youngest son's face and sighed silently. He had no doubt about his youngest son and also felt sorry for what happened in the imperial palace. It was also because the empress didn't control him well that Xiao Yanru had such a chance and almost hurt Chu Liuxin. The youngest son had always been a child. Now he seemed to have suddenly become an adult, but he still looked listless. "Brother, have you checked it out?" Prince Qing said. He focused on the direction of the investigation, and at the same time, implied that it had nothing to do with him. "I have. The eunuch who sent the bow is dead," the emperor said coldly. "Then it's not easy to handle." Prince Chung frowned and said, "It's certain that someone wants to hurt Prince Qin, but why? If it's just to make Prince Qin lose face, it should not be this kind of thing." The breaking of the bow and arrow was neither a big deal nor a small matter. For Chu Luchun, it was not a big deal. In fact, he was making a big deal out of it. Prince Cheng was hinting that the emperor did not have to do this. "Your Majesty, why don't I go and check?" Chu Qing finally found a chance to express his loyalty and hurriedly asked for the order. He didn't care about the size of the matter. As long as there was something to do, it meant that the emperor put him in an important position. He didn't have any clues after investigating the previous case. Now, he just wanted to find something else to investigate so that the emperor could put him in an important position. His words sounded gentle, but they hit Chu Qing's weak spot. For a moment, he blushed and didn't know how to answer. These words sounded amiable, but they stabbed at Chu Qing's weak spot. For a moment, his face flushed red, and he didn't know how to respond to these words. "Father, let me do it," Chu Liwei asked. "Prince Cheng, let me do it." If the emperor handed this matter to someone, it meant that he trusted that person. At this time, of course, he couldn't do it. "Father, I happen to be empty-handed, and my legs have already recovered. I originally wanted to serve you. Just leave this matter to me." Chu Liuzhou immediately realized this and hurriedly said. Only Chu Liuxin seemed to be a little confused. He looked at one person and then another with a blank look. He didn't know what to do and rushed forward to express his loyalty. "Someone will naturally investigate this matter, but you." The emperor narrowed his eyes with a cold face and looked at them one by one with a cold look. "Your Majesty, Prince Qin and Princess Qin are here." A eunuch sent a voice transmission outside. The emperor had ordered that if Prince Qin and Princess Qin came over, they should inform him first. The emperor calmed down and leaned back. "Let them in." The eunuch hurriedly left. After a while, Chu Luchun came in with Xiao Wanru. The two of them respectfully kowtowed to the emperor 3 times and then were helped up. One was handsome and gentle. Except for his pale face, which made the emperor not satisfied with him. The emperor was very satisfied with him. Then he turned to Xiao Wanru, who was standing beside him. Although she looked a little childish, she still looked stunning. They were indeed a pair of excellent sons and daughters-in-law. The emperor's cold face just now warmed up. After asking Durong to reward him, he asked someone to bring a chair for Chu Luchen in a friendly manner, for fear that he would be tired. Xiao Wanru stood behind Chu Luchen cleverly, lowered her head and shoulders, and glanced at the broken bow on the ground. She had an intuition that this was the one Chu Luchen had used yesterday. Her long eyelashes couldn't help fluttering twice to hide the trace of darkness in her eyes. "Chen, how are you?" The emperor looked Chu Luchen up and down and asked worriedly. He had thought that Chu Liuchen's face had always been poor. Now, compared with Xiao Wanru's bright and pink face, he felt that Chu Liuchen's face was too pale, and he was really worried. "I'm fine. Thank you for worrying, uncle," Chu Luchen said with a smile and a gentle look. He glanced at the bow on the ground and his brothers standing there, and asked in surprise, "Did you find anything?" "There is indeed something wrong with the bow, but the eunuch who sent it here is dead," the emperor said in annoyance. "Uncle, in fact, there is no need to investigate it. This kind of thing is not a big deal. The reason why I sent it to the palace yesterday was that I couldn't spare time to ask about it," Chu Luchen said with a faint smile. With such a look and such words, the emperor became more distressed and angry. Chu Luchen was so sick, but there were still people who couldn't tolerate him and wanted to make him suffer. "I will definitely find out about this matter. Take Princess Chen to bow to the empress first. Your imperial grandmother is still waiting for you at the end," the emperor said. Originally, they should meet the emperor first, then the empress dowager, and then the empress. However, the empress dowager wanted to talk with her grandson for a while, so she deliberately changed the order. "Yes, I will." Chu Luchen stood up and nodded in response. Xiao Wanru and he bowed again, retreated to the outside of the imperial study, and then got on the palace sedan chair outside together. Originally, they had to walk to the palace to express their gratitude, but the emperor was worried about Chu Liuchen's health, so he specially prepared a palace sedan chair for them. Chu Luchen, a man, didn't walk, so Xiao Wanru, a little girl, had to sit in the palace sedan chair with him. Fortunately, this palace sedan chair was a little bigger than before, so it was not too crowded for two people to sit in it. Of course, if Chu Luchen behaved properly, it would not be crowded for two people to sit in it. However, Chu Luchen was not so well behaved at the moment. As soon as he sat in it, he put Xiao Wanru on his lap and then asked to start the sedan chair. Xiao Wanru struggled twice with a blush. Seeing that she couldn't get rid of him, she simply stopped struggling. She leaned her head on Chu Liuchen's chest and asked in a low voice, "Will the empress make things difficult for me?" Chu Luchen said leisurely. Xiao Wanru raised her watery eyes and looked at Chu Luchen. In her opinion, the empress must not have good intentions for Chu Luchen. Her son wanted to be the crown prince wholeheartedly, and Chu Luchen was a great obstacle to her. "Will the empress still like you?" Looking at her, a pair of beautiful eyes widened in surprise, as if he had asked a very obvious thing, but she actually did not know. A pink little mouth was slightly open, making people want to fiercely close to her. Chu Luchen never mistreated himself. He lowered his head and kissed her lips quickly and accurately. When Xiao Wanru came to her senses, she wanted to struggle. However, she remembered that they were in the palace sedan chair, and there were two eunuchs from the palace carrying the sedan chair. She was ashamed and annoyed at the moment, but she didn't dare to move hard. After Chu Luchen finished kissing her, he leaned over her ear and laughed happily. She couldn't help but reach out and pinch him hard. Chu Luchen groaned in pain in a low voice, and Xiao Wanru let go. "Are you trying to kill your husband?" Looking at her bulging little face, Chu Luchen said with a smile. Xiao Wanru couldn't help but want to hit him again. "Well, it's okay. Although the empress doesn't like you, she won't do anything to you in public. At most, she will ignore you. If she ignores you, you don't have to pay attention to her." Seeing that she was really angry, Chu Luchen stopped while he was ahead. He reminded her with a smile, "Anyway, she can't really like you." His words were a little roundabout, but Xiao Wanru completely understood the meaning of his words. They were originally on opposite sides, so it was impossible for them to have a good impression of each other. What they did was just superficial affection. She nodded at once, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Your Highness, what else do you want me to pay attention to?" "Nothing. Do whatever you want. If others don't give you face, you don't have to feel wronged. Now you are Princess Qin, my princess." Chu Luchen smiled slightly and said meaningfully. He meant that she would be fine with his protection. Xiao Wanru's heart softened more and more. The palace sedan chair stopped at the gate of the Empress's Fengyi Palace this time. The two of them got out of the sedan chair and went to the palace gate together. Some palace maids had already received the news and came out to welcome them. As soon as she entered the door, Xiao Wanru was shocked by the people in the Empress's palace. Although she had been here several times before, she had never seen so many beauties. Seeing the two of them come in, all the S looked over. They heard that Prince Qin welcomed them in person, so they wanted to see what kind of woman could make Prince Qin do this. Therefore, Xiao Wanru was met with a lot of scrutinizing eyes, some of which were disdainful, some of which were sarcastic, and some of which were full of admiration. It was still very stressful to bear so many gazes. Fortunately, Xiao Wanru had been prepared. She walked in with Chu Luchen gracefully, which made the S who were watching the show less playful. Chapter 887. After bowing, the Empress asked with a smile, "Since Prince Qin has married such a beautiful wife, Empress Dowager and I are relieved. I hope that you two can live a harmonious life in the future, which can be regarded as a relief to the Emperor." Her words were very kind. As an elder, the Empress's words were extremely reasonable, but Xiao Wanru heard some other meanings. She slightly pursed her lips, lowered her head shyly, and nodded slightly. At this time, as a new bride, she didn't need to speak. "Thank you, Empress," Chu Luchen said gently. Xiao Wanru shyly bowed sideways again. "I have to go to pay my respects to Imperial Grandmother, so I'll leave to the Empress." He meant that he was going to leave as soon as he arrived. The Empress's face darkened. In front of the hall full of S, she felt that she had been humiliated. "You just arrived. Why are you leaving so soon? Do you want to sit for a while?" Among the princes, Prince Qin was the first to get married. "I still want to be close to Princess Qin for a while. Could it be that Prince Qin is reluctant to part with her now?" The Empress said with a smile and glanced at Xiao Wanru's lowered face with a hint of affection. Xiao Wanru quietly took a step back to Chu Liuchen's side and leaned close to him. On this occasion and in this situation, it was inappropriate for her to say anything. Fortunately, she was a new bride now. Of course, she also believed that Chu Luchen would deal with this matter well and would not damage the reputation of Prince Chen's mansion. "I'm indeed a little reluctant to part with her. In order to let the Empress know that Imperial Grandmother sent someone here early in the morning and asked me to meet the Empress first and then go there immediately. Imperial Grandmother said that she had a big gift for me. I really can't bear to part with this big gift." Chu Luchen said unhurriedly with a very elegant smile and handsome eyes. With such a handsome face, all the S couldn't help but feel their heartbeats speed up when they saw him, and their eyes fell on Xiao Wanru with a little jealousy. Such a handsome child, who was favored by the Empress Dowager and the Emperor, could be said to be powerful and powerful. It was really a blessing for her to marry such a husband. She didn't know why Princess Chen's life was so good. She actually married such an immortal-like person. He had talent, looks, power, and even his attitude was so amiable and gentle. Such a person was like an immortal in heaven. How could Princess Qin pick up such a good person? In the past, there were rumors that Prince Qin was moody, but the rumors were not credible. "Your Highness, since the Empress is so reluctant to leave you and Princess Qin, why not stay a little longer? The Empress Dowager is not in such a hurry." Because of Chu Liuchen's kindness and gentleness, some S couldn't help looking up at Chu Luchen with a charming smile and said. Xiao Wanru raised her eyes slightly and saw a bright face, which was considered outstanding among the S. It seemed that she should be a favored one, otherwise she would not have interrupted the conversation between Chu Luchen and the Empress at this time. "Empress, who is this?" Chu Luchun looked up at the woman opposite him. She was about 17 or 18 years old and was in the prime of her beauty. She was also gorgeously dressed. Seeing Chu Luchun look up at her, she hurriedly pinched her handkerchief and looked at Chu Luchun tenderly. But a pair of bright and beautiful eyes seemed to stare at Chu Luchun. They were delicate, charming, and a bit seductive, which really made people's hearts flutter. This is Beauty Wu, who has just entered the palace. Beauty Wu is the most favored by the emperor among this batch of people who entered the palace. The empress said with a dignified and decent look. Since Beauty Wu was speaking for her, she naturally pointed out Beauty Wu's identity. Others might not know Chu Luchun's character, but the empress did. She was afraid that Chu Luchun would do something out of line again, which would be difficult to deal with. She was the master of the imperial harem. Once something happened, the emperor would definitely come to her. "Greetings, Your Highness." Hearing the empress's words, Beauty Wu immediately stood up and said in a charming voice. Then she slowly bowed, and her figure was even more charming. Beauty Wu was indeed good-looking, and the clothes she wore were very suitable for her figure. Her waist was tight, and her breasts were high. Coupled with her outstanding appearance, she looked at Chu Luchun with her big watery eyes at this time, which made her look more attractive. "I'm afraid that Beauty Wu's family background is not high, right?" Chu Luchun asked gently. His words were gentle, but the meaning in his words was very sharp. Beauty Wu was stunned. She didn't expect that Prince Qin, who was as gentle as jade, would say such words to her. Her family background was indeed not high. She was just the daughter of a concubine of a small official, and she came from a remote place. She didn't know much about Prince Qin, otherwise she wouldn't have stood up and said that just now. "Your Highness," she said in a charming voice, with tears in her beautiful eyes and grievance. Such a beauty was the most attractive. She was tearful and aggrieved, and even a cold-hearted man would feel pity for her. Not to mention that Prince Qin was originally a gentle and elegant child. At this time, she inexplicably forgot her identity as an. She only felt that Prince Qin in front of her was more and more handsome, and the more she looked at him, the more she was attracted. The Empress's face changed, and she had a bad feeling. "Your Highness, this is my uncle's. I should be respectful to her, but she looks at me in such a seductive way. She is no different from those palace maids and misses who bump into me on their own in the past, so I can't respect her." Chu Luchun's originally gentle face suddenly became cold, and a gloomy aura covered his handsome eyebrows. His eyes were sinister and cold. The concubines, who were originally full of fantasies about him, were all shocked. Just a moment ago, it was still a sunny day, but in an instant, they had fallen into an ice cave. Moreover, his words clearly said that this Beauty Wu was not virtuous and actually wanted to seduce him. The Empress was angry and resentful. She was angry that Beauty Wu forgot herself and dared to treat Chu Luchun like this. Those in the Imperial Palace who knew Chu Luchun well didn't know that he was a cold-hearted man with a kind face. Those palace maids who bumped into him and intended to throw themselves into his arms didn't even survive. Although those misses from aristocratic families didn't lose their lives, they didn't have a good ending either. They often ran away crying after being ridiculed by him. The current situation was also very difficult to deal with. Chu Luchun said that Beauty Wu seduced him in front of all the S, which made the Empress feel embarrassed. "Your Highness, I didn't. I just..." Beauty Wu came to her senses at this time, hurriedly knelt down to the Empress, and anxiously defended herself. She just spoke for the Empress, and at this time, it was inconvenient for the Empress to really push her out. Otherwise, who would stand on her side in the future? The Empress coughed in a low voice, and her face showed a gentle smile. "Prince Qin, don't be angry. Beauty Wu always looks like this, and she talks like this to everyone, but it's not because of Prince Qin. It turns out that Beauty Wu talks to any man so affectionately. Your Highness, you have to find out who Beauty Wu has talked to in the past. If it's just her father and brother, it's fine, but if it's someone else..." Chu Luchun sneered and stood in the main hall with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes were cold, and anyone could see that he was angry. Of course, he meant that Beauty Wu was unclean. "Your Highness..." Beauty Wu sat on the ground in horror. Others only heard a word, but she really knew her own affairs as a family member. Before Beauty Wu entered the palace, she really had a past with her cousin. Although they didn't really break through the last barrier, they had done other things that should be done between them. Because her cousin loved seductive women, Beauty Wu certainly guessed in that direction. After that, in order to enter the palace to enjoy the glory and splendor, of course, she dumped her cousin and entered the palace. Your Highness, find out more, lest you ruin the reputation of the palace and humiliate my uncle. Chu Luchun said coldly. Although his voice was still lazy, his words were sharp. At this time, the Empress was also restless. She couldn't let Chu Luchun continue, so she could only grit her teeth and suppress her anger. She forced a smile and said, "Thank you for reminding me, Prince Chen. I'm afraid that Empress Dowager is anxious. Prince Chen, you'd better go first, lest Empress Dowager gets anxious." At this moment, she no longer wanted to suppress Xiao Wanru with the help of a group of S. She just wanted to send this god of plague away. With just a few words, Beauty Wu was killed here. The Empress felt indescribably aggrieved. In fact, Beauty Wu was tactful. Although she was favored by the Emperor after entering the palace, she had always been very respectful to the Empress and always stood on her side. She could be regarded as a discerning person. She could make a good impression in front of the Emperor and could be used by the Empress, so the Empress naturally took her in. However, she didn't expect that Beauty Wu would die in such a short time. With what happened today, the Emperor would definitely get the news soon. The Empress was also very sharp-eyed. Judging from Beauty Wu's usual appearance, she could tell that she was not well educated. It was very likely that she had an affair with someone before entering the palace. In fact, it didn't matter whether they found out or not. If the Emperor became suspicious, no matter how good she was, Beauty Wu would be ruined. "Thank you for your understanding, Your Highness. Then I'll take the princess to see Empress Dowager now." Chu Luchun smiled slightly, relaxed his face, and bowed to the Empress. Xiao Wanru also bowed. "Okay, go ahead." The Empress waved her hand gently, with the demeanor of an elder who was the mother of the world. Chu Luchun nodded with a smile and walked out with Xiao Wanru. However, after taking a few steps, he suddenly turned around, looked at Beauty Wu who was still kneeling on the ground, and reiterated to the Empress, "Your Highness, you have to find out this matter. The Imperial Palace is not a place where anyone can come in at will. What's more, it is related to my uncle. I will find out. Thank you for your concern, Prince Chen." The Empress almost squeezed out these words through gritted teeth. With the Empress's reply, Chu Luchun turned around with satisfaction and returned to his gentle and elegant appearance when he just entered the door. He left with Xiao Wanru, leaving the hall alone in silence. Chapter 888. The hall was very cold and empty. The smartest all looked at Beauty Wu, who was kneeling on the ground, with a sarcastic look. Beauty Wu, who had competed with them for favor a few days ago, was useless now. She didn't have eyes. She just wanted to look at Prince Chen, but she actually wanted to seduce him. She didn't know how beautiful Princess Chen, who was standing next to Prince Chen, was. She didn't know when it was her turn to be a demon. The rumor that Prince Chen was not interested in women had been around for a long time. Everyone took it to heart when they heard it. However, this ignorant girl dared to get close to him, especially when Prince Chen's newly married princess was beside him. How ignorant she was to do such a thing. Many shook their heads secretly, thinking that Beauty Wu was a little stupid. "Someone, take Beauty Wu to the cold palace." After Chu Luchun left, the Empress's face had been gloomy. At this time she said coldly. Two nannies came over and pulled Beauty Wu away. Your Highness, I am innocent. Prince Chen's words have no basis at all. Please explain clearly, Your Highness." Beauty Wu shrank back, avoided the hands of the two nannies, and argued while crying. The Empress waved her hand without being moved. The two nannies pulled her again. This time, Beauty Wu couldn't avoid them and was directly dragged away. Your Highness, I am the Emperor's woman. You can't make such a rash judgment. I want to see the Emperor. I will definitely ask the Emperor for forgiveness. Beauty Wu struggled and shouted for help. However, no one paid attention to her, and the hall became quiet again. At this time, the Empress was also in the mood to entertain other S, so she waved her hand and motioned them to leave. All the S got up cleverly, said goodbye to the Empress, and then left Fengyi Palace. After everyone left, the Empress suddenly grabbed the teacup beside her and threw it to the ground. The teacup broke on the ground. "Your Highness!" The palace servants all knelt down in panic. A few of them happened to kneel beside the broken porcelain. Their knees were bleeding, but they didn't dare to make a sound. "Your Highness, the Emperor may come again later," a trusted eunuch carefully reminded the Empress. "All of you are dismissed." The Empress calmed her anger and said coldly. The palace maids did not dare to hesitate. One by one, they retreated, leaving behind a trusted eunuch. "How dare an insignificant Prince Chen treat me like this?" The Empress said sternly after all the palace attendants had left. There was no one else present, so she didn't need to hide her emotions. "Your Highness, please quell your anger," the eunuch said. "Calm my anger? I can't quell my anger. What does he think I am? He can come and go as he pleases. Why doesn't he take a look at his own status? He's nothing but an invalid. Could it be that he really thinks?" The Empress was so angry that she pointed in the direction of the Palace of Benevolent Peace and cursed loudly. The eunuch hurriedly knelt down and hurriedly said, "Your Highness, please be careful with your words." The panic in her voice was much sharper than usual, and it immediately made the Empress sober. She took 2 deep breaths and tried to calm the breath in her heart. She really felt that she couldn't bear it. It was fine in the past, but today, in front of so many S, he actually didn't give her, the mistress of the 6 palaces, any face. The more the Empress thought about it, the angrier she got. The more she thought about it, the more she couldn't bear it. Fortunately, however, she still had some rationality. After sitting in the position of Empress for so many years, she knew that she should be more calm at this time. "Rise, this Empress understands." She waved her hand at her trusted eunuch, indicating for her to stand up. She then turned her gaze in the direction of the Palace of Compassionate and Peaceful. As long as that old woman didn't die, she wouldn't be able to dominate the palace. In addition, this little bastard had always been disrespectful to her, causing her to lose face several times. "Your Majesty, Prince Chen has always been like this. You don't have to be angry. It's Beauty Wu's fault today. She doesn't look righteous, but she dares to seduce Prince Chen. She doesn't know who she is and who Prince Chen is. How can he be seduced by her?" His trusted eunuch advised. "Useless idiot," the Empress said angrily. In fact, she just wanted to keep Xiao Wanru here today and show her strength, but Beauty Wu ruined her plan. If Beauty Wu hadn't taken the initiative to stand up, this matter wouldn't have come to this. Beauty Wu deserved to die. She thought that she could turn over others after being favored by the Emperor for a few days. She didn't know what she was capable of. There had never been a lack of favored beauties in the palace, but who could really win the Emperor's heart? Did she really think that she had become a phoenix after flying up the branch? "Your Majesty, don't be angry. Beauty Wu did such a thing on her own, and she did it in front of all the S. It's for the good of the Emperor that you dealt with it in this way. Even if the Emperor said something to you, you could explain it in this way. Besides, Prince Chen is here," her trusted eunuch said with a smile. The Empress understood the meaning of his words and slowly calmed down. But after thinking about it, she still felt a little indignant. Neither Prince Yu nor Prince Zhou got married, but the Emperor was so obsessed with Prince Chen that he brought him, the 3rd prince, to the forefront to get married. How would others think of Prince Zhou? There had always been an order of seniority. How could he mess up the rules? In fact, it was not just the matter of getting married. The Emperor didn't care so much about the time of getting married. She was just afraid that after the Emperor messed up the rules, the throne might also be messed up in the future. As long as she thought of this, the Empress couldn't be in a good mood. "Your Majesty, don't worry. The reason why Prince Chen got married the earliest is that he is in poor health. If it weren't for his poor health, it's even possible that the Emperor and the Empress Dowager wouldn't have proposed the marriage so early. Although this kind of thing is not made clear, all the civil and military officials in the court know it clearly. The trusted eunuch said with a flattering smile. These words comforted the empress, and a faint smile appeared on her face, but it was soon hidden behind a trace of anger. Princess Chin escaped from the things that I arranged today. Your Majesty, if it doesn't work this time, there will be a next time. Since she has married Prince Chin, she will enter the palace from time to time. Since you are the elder of Prince Chin, she has to come to the palace to see you. In this way, you can know Princess Chin's whereabouts. The trusted eunuch was very good at talking and kept talking to the empress. The empress was overjoyed and nodded, thinking that it made sense. She could always have a chance to deal with Xiao Wanru. Chu Luchen was in poor health, and now he was in the court, so he didn't have much time to accompany Xiao Wanru. In fact, it didn't take much effort for her to deal with Xiao Wanru. She wanted to deal with Xiao Wanru because of Chu Luchen. However, after so many years, Chu Luchen was not only fine, but also got better. The empress wanted to deal with him, but she couldn't find any other weaknesses. Since he agreed to marry Xiao Wanru might be his only weakness. After all, for so many years, Chu Luchen didn't even have a woman by his side. No matter how charming the woman he sent to him was, in the end, she would be thrown out or even lose her life. After fighting with Chu Luchen for many years, the empress came to the conclusion that Chu Luchen was not a person who had tender feelings for women. He was very cold and ruthless. She didn't know whether Xiao Wanru was really different to Chu Luchen or he just took advantage of her. But in any case, the empress thought that it might be a breakthrough to deal with Xiao Wanru. Well, let's leave it at that for the time being. The empress nodded. She would definitely fight with Xiao Wanru, but it was very easy to deal with Princess Chin, who had not reached the marriageable age. As long as Chu Luchen was not around to protect her, she could deal with her at any time. Your Majesty, do you dislike me? Xiao Wanru sat in Chu Luchen's arms and asked as they squeezed in the palace sedan chair again. Of course. Chu Luchen said indifferently, if you don't want to see her, you don't have to. If I'm not here next time, she can go directly to see Imperial Grandmother. She doesn't dare to be presumptuous in Imperial Grandmother's place. He played with the silk ribbon around her waist with his big slender hands. Xiao Wanru wanted to bite him. She was the empress of a country. She couldn't be seen by anyone if she wanted to. Moreover, she was his elder with a noble status. If she ignored her, it would be a serious crime. That's the empress. Xiao Wanru squinted at him, pursed her lips, and said unhappily. Her face was small. At this time, her facial features looked very complicated, which made her look cute. Chu Luchen reached out to pinch her pink little face. Xiao Wanru slapped away his hand in pain, hurriedly reached out to cover her face, and said with a pair of bright watery eyes, "It hurts. I didn't use much strength. I just touched it a little." Chu Luchen saw a red handprint on Xiao Wanru's cheek and couldn't help regretting it. He really didn't feel that he had used much strength. However, this little beauty's face was as tender as tofu. Just a touch made her face turn red, which looked painful. "Don't touch it. Prince, you obviously used your strength," Xiao Wanru said angrily. Her eyes seemed to be able to speak and silently accused Chu Luchen, which made Chu Luchen's heart soften. He only felt a sweet and sour feeling filling his heart, making his eyes gentle for a moment. It's my fault. Zhuozhuo, don't be angry. Come on, let me see if it's really red." Chu Luchen said with a smile and came to pull Xiao Wanru's hand. But this time, he really didn't dare to use too much force. His little princess was like a ball of dough. A slight touch would leave a mark. Don't look, don't look." Xiao Wanru hurriedly reached out to cover her face and struggled to push his hand away. Her face was red. Chu Luchen used to be aloof, but why was he so shameless now? Was he really the crown prince she saw in her last life? Could it be that he had changed his core? Xiao Wanru was ashamed and angry when she finally pushed his hand away. She was caught off guard and let him kiss her a few more times. If she hadn't known that they were in the palace, she almost couldn't help but exclaim. However, he seemed to be enjoying it. He leaned back and smiled lazily. "Do you want to know why the Empress dislikes you?" Chapter 889. The Empress Dowager had been waiting for them in the palace for a long time. Hearing that they came, she hurriedly asked them to enter the palace. When they bowed to the Empress Dowager together, the Empress Dowager smiled and squinted. The two people in front of her, one was handsome and the other was extremely beautiful. No matter how she looked at them, she felt comfortable. They were really a match made in heaven. She knew her grandson best, not to mention that he was a grandson whom she doted on wholeheartedly. Although Chu Luchan looked as gentle and indifferent as usual, Empress Dowager could still see his suppressed joy from the corners of his eyes and the tips of his eyebrows. His joy was real and full of vitality. This was a real person, not the previous one who seemed to only have a facial expression and never showed his heart. In this regard, the Empress Dowager thanked Xiao Wanru from the bottom of her heart. It was also because Chu Luchan felt that Xiao Wanru was very pleasing to the eye. They were a perfect match, which made people very happy. Her worry that they didn't consummate their marriage also faded away. As long as they lived a good life and Chen was happy, it would be fine. For so many years, she had never seen Chen so happy. The Empress Dowager took the two of them to sit down beside her and smiled from ear to ear. Imperial Grandmother. Chu Luchan rubbed his forehead. Imperial Grandmother, who had always been wise and kind, was smiling from ear to ear today. I know. I'm so happy. Empress Dowager responded, and then sighed softly. Chen, you have a family now. You are an adult. You must not be willful in doing things in the future. You have to think about Imperial Grandmother and your new princess. Speaking of this, the Empress Dowager's eyes turned red. For so many years, this child had been very self-defeating and didn't take himself seriously at all. It was obvious that he didn't want to live. Fortunately, this child actually liked Anne's granddaughter, otherwise he might have lost his life. Imperial Grandmother, don't worry. I'm fine now. Although I'm a little weaker than ordinary people, it's okay. Chu Luchan comforted the Empress Dowager. That's good, that's good. My worries have been resolved. In the future, even if I die, I can rest assured. The Empress Dowager wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Among so many grandchildren, Chu Luchan was the one she cared about the most. This child was really pitiful. Imperial Grandmother, don't talk about death. Imperial Grandmother still has to live for 100 years. Chu Luchan comforted her with a smile. In the future, you still have to hold your great-grandchildren. These words made the Empress Dowager's eyes light up and she nodded repeatedly. Chen was not old, and Xiao Wanru was even younger. In fact, they were not in a hurry to consummate the marriage. Looking at the couple in front of her and thinking about how lovely their children would be in the future, the Empress Dowager couldn't help laughing again. Come, reward Princess Chen. Empress Dowager ordered. Some palace maids had already brought out the prepared gifts. Looking at the gift boxes in the hands of eunuchs and palace maids, Xiao Wanru hurriedly stood up and said, Empress Dowager, how can there be so many? Call her Imperial Grandmother. The Empress Dowager took Xiao Wanru's hand and said kindly. Xiao Wanru bit her lip and then called softly, Imperial Grandmother. Good. Live a good life with Chen in the future. If Chen bullies you, tell me and I will teach him a lesson for you. The Empress Dowager said with a smile. Teach Chu Luchan a lesson? Xiao Wanru subconsciously raised her eyes to look at Chu Luchan beside her, only to find that he was also looking at her with an indescribable affection in his deep eyes. She blushed and hurriedly lowered her head. In fact, when the two of them came over in a palace sedan chair just now, he bullied her. Seeing that although the two of them did not speak, there was affection in their eyes, the Empress Dowager was finally relieved. This time, Chen really married the person he wanted to marry, which was very good. He didn't have to follow the old path of his parents and finally cause his son to fall into such a situation. The Empress Dowager was very happy. She talked to them and even asked someone to invite the emperor over. As for those gifts, they were all prepared by the Empress Dowager. Of course, Xiao Wanru could only accept them shyly. She was like this, but Chu Luchan took it for granted and didn't feel ashamed at all. He even specially thanked the Empress Dowager for Xiao Wanru, which made the Empress Dowager involuntarily scold him for being cheeky and rebuke him with a smile. The atmosphere in the palace of Benevolent and Peaceful was harmonious. The emperor came very quickly. After arriving at the palace of Benevolent and Peaceful, he chatted with the Empress Dowager for a while and then ordered lunch. After lunch, the emperor took Chu Luchin to the Imperial study to do something. The Empress Dowager was tired, so she went to have a rest first. Xiao Wanru also took a short nap in the side hall and then got up. Seeing that it was still early and the Empress Dowager was still taking a nap, Xiao Wanru went out of the palace with Yu Jie. It was already spring, and it was a good time to enjoy the scenery. Many flowers suddenly bloomed overnight, even in Duke Xing's mansion, let alone in the Imperial Palace. They walked out along the road of the Palace of Benevolent and Peaceful casually. At first, they took the main road and then they took some more remote roads. The flowers growing on the main road were not as beautiful and colorful as those growing on the small road. After all, the main road was prepared for walking. If some exotic flowers grew in the middle of the road with people coming and going, they would be easily destroyed. It was easier to raise the flowers on the side, and it didn't hinder others from enjoying the scenery. Xiao Wanru was not familiar with the Palace of Benevolent and Peaceful in her last life, and it was located in a different direction from the Chuxiu Palace. Xiao Wanru also knew nothing about this area, so she just walked along the scenery casually. The master and the servant walked farther and farther away from the Palace of Benevolent and Peaceful. "Princess, the peonies are so beautiful. Why are there so many varieties?" They now entered a place, which was actually a garden dedicated to planting peonies. There were all kinds of peonies planted in it, which were so beautiful that Yu Jie was also dazzled. The precious peonies that couldn't be seen outside were in full bloom, which was extremely beautiful. Xiao Wanru lowered her body, looked at a peony and said softly, "It was written on the gate of the courtyard just now. It should be full of peonies." Everyone liked beautiful flowers, including her, so she couldn't help but take another look at them. "Princess, let me pick one for you and wear it. It will look better when you wear it." Yu Jie rolled her eyes and said, "Her master was more beautiful than a flower. If she wore this flower, she would definitely bring out the best in it. This is the Imperial Palace." Xiao Wanru glared at the lawless servant girl. "I know, so I will wear it here for a while. After wearing it, we won't wear it out, so no one will know." Yu Jie really liked the peonies here. Moreover, she always felt that her princess would look better if she wore a peony. The flowers in this palace can't be picked casually. They must be picked. "I know Yu Jie suddenly felt that it was right. The person who answered was not her master. She looked up in astonishment and saw a beautiful and dazzling face opposite her. She was stunned for a moment. There was someone here? Xiao Wanru also raised her head and looked at the three people opposite her, or one master and two servants. There was a palace maid, a eunuch, and a beautiful noble lady. The lady should be in her 20s or 30s. She couldn't see her face clearly, but her outstanding appearance amazed Xiao Wanru. Time seemed to be very kind to her and didn't leave any trace on her face. She looked at Xiao Wanru with her beautiful eyes and a very gentle and kind smile on her face. In terms of momentum, she was definitely not an ordinary person. Xiao Wanru took a few steps back and hurriedly saluted. "I'm afraid that I've disturbed your highness by accident. Please forgive me." Even if she didn't know her identity, judging from her appearance and behavior, she must be a concubine in the palace. However, this concubine was so beautiful that Xiao Wanru couldn't think of any other concubine in the palace who was so outstanding. Among the beauties she had seen, Xiao Yenru was the most outstanding one, but the one in front of her was even taller than Xiao Yenru. Even because she was a little older, she was more elegant and feminine. She was very beautiful, elegant, and imposing. Such a woman was destined to be extraordinary. However, after thinking about all the famous concubines in her mind, she didn't think that she was one of them. "Are you Princess Jin?" The palace maid looked Xiao Wanru up and down and asked with a smile. She turned around from a cluster of peonies on one side, and the two palace maids hurriedly followed her. "Yes, I don't know which concubine she is from." When she got close, Xiao Wanru hurriedly saluted, but still looked at the concubine in front of her curiously. No matter how she thought about it, she just couldn't figure it out. There seemed to be no such outstanding concubine in her previous life. Her eyes suddenly fell on the clothes she was wearing, and she suddenly narrowed her eyes. Didn't it say that people in the palace couldn't use things made of colorful yarn at will? If she was not mistaken, the clothes in front of her should be made of rainbow muslin. Once the emperor said that he didn't like it, it was destined that these couldn't wantonly use the rainbow muslin to make clothes. At most, they could secretly make some small things like mosquito nets and sachets. How could they openly make such large clothes? Wearing them like this, weren't they afraid of the emperor's anger? It was really strange. I seldom come out and live alone in the quiet palace. I didn't expect to see Princess Chen when I walked around casually today. The concubine said softly. She also looked Xiao Wanru up and down, and the smile on her face became more and more gentle. She pointed to a small pavilion in the peonies and said, "Shall we go over and have a seat? I happened to be here to enjoy the flowers just now, so I prepared some tea." "Thank you, Your Highness. Sorry to disturb you." Xiao Wanru was a little embarrassed. The concubine had even prepared tea early. It could be seen that she had wanted to enjoy the flowers quietly, but she had disturbed her. "It doesn't matter. It's very lonely when I sit alone," the concubine said with a smile, turned around and went to the pavilion, with Xiao Wanru following her. The two of them entered the pavilion one after the other. The concubine waved her hand, and the two palace maids retreated to the outside of the pavilion. Xiao Wanru hesitated for a moment and also waved her hand. Yu Jia also retreated to the entrance of the pavilion with the two palace maids. Chapter 890. Remember in 1 second, 800 mail sign /say, net wonderful pop-up window free reading. On the stone table in the pavilion, tea and snacks had been prepared, and there was a small stove on the side with water boiling on it. On one side of the pavilion, facing the wind, there was a light blue veil hanging down. The two of them sat down, facing the sun, blocking the wind behind them, facing the scenery of blooming peonies. No matter how they looked at it, it made them feel comfortable. It was indeed a good place to admire the flowers and scenery. No wonder it had been occupied so early. "Sit down first." They smiled slightly and reached out to lead Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru nodded, didn't stand on ceremony, and sat down gracefully. They raised the teapot beside her hand and poured a cup for Xiao Wanru. Then she said with a smile, "Have a taste of my tea?" Xiao Wanru reached out to take it and took a sip. A trace of surprise flashed across her eyes. In fact, she didn't know what this tea was, but she had tasted it once at the Empress Dowager's place just now. The taste was particularly light and mellow. How could she forget it? "Your tea is really good, Your Highness." Xiao Wanru put it down and said calmly, "Since Princess Chen likes it, I have some more. I'll give some to you later." They said with an obvious kindness with a smile. However, this kindness was indeed inexplicable for Xiao Wanru. The tea used by the Empress Dowager would not be ordinary tea. The in front of her actually offered to give her some. She was too generous. Xiao Wanru's long eyelashes fluttered twice to hide the trace of darkness at the bottom of her eyes. She shook her head with a smile and said, "I don't dare to accept your gift. You are an elder, and I am just a junior." Since they deserved the title of, she was naturally the emperor's servant and Xiao Wanru's elder. Since it is an elder's gift, you can accept it. Did Princess Chen not accept the Empress Dowager's gift? They seemed not to hear Xiao Wanru's refusal and still said with a smile. The Empress Dowager's identity was unique in the palace. However, the in front of her didn't talk about the Empress Dowager, but talked about the Empress Dowager, who was one level higher than the Empress Dowager. Xiao Wanru became more and more curious about the identity of the. "Is this a greeting gift from Her Highness?" Xiao Wanru tilted her head slightly, which made her look more playful, cute, and approachable. "Actually, that's not it. My meeting gift is this." Seeing that Xiao Wanru was easy to talk to and had a gentle attitude, they smiled even more. She reached out to take out a small ornamental box from her wide long sleeve and pushed it in front of Xiao Wanru. Today is the first time for Princess Chen to come to the palace to meet her relatives. I happened to be busy just now, so I didn't come over. Take this as my compensation." With that, she pushed the small ornamental box in front of Xiao Wanru. She actually prepared a gift. Could it be that she really missed the event in front of the Empress? The curiosity in Xiao Wanru's eyes became more and more intense. She didn't reach out to take the jewelry box handed to her. Instead, she looked at the with burning eyes and scrutinized her. She was very confused. "Why is Your Highness giving me a greeting gift? I don't even know who Your Highness is, so how could I dare to accept Your Highness's greeting gift?" Xiao Wanru said. Seeing that Xiao Wanru didn't accept the gift, the sighed softly, raised her head, and looked into the distance with a little disappointment and sadness in her eyes. "It has been too long. I'm afraid that the palace has long forgotten about it. I have to tell you." "Your Highness, please go ahead," Xiao Wanru said softly. "Have you heard of Concubine Lan, Princess Chen?" The didn't answer for a long time and said slowly after a long while. "Concubine Lan?" Xiao Wanru suddenly felt as if her head had been hit by someone, and some deep memories suddenly rushed out. Concubine Lan, who used to be the most favored concubine in the Imperial harem. Xiao Yanru had heard of Concubine Lan before. So what if she was the most favored concubine in the Imperial harem? In the end, she still ended up being imprisoned. In this life, she thought of Concubine Lan because Chu Luchen mentioned Xiao Yanru. At that time, Xiao Yanru always liked to go to Concubine Lan when she entered the Imperial Palace. The one in front of her was the Concubine Lan that she had heard of in her previous life and this life. "Do you know me, Princess Chen?" Concubine Lan looked at Xiao Wanru with a smile. Her eyes were extremely beautiful. Xiao Wanru shook her head at first, and then nodded. After that, she restrained her surprise and said, "Your Highness, I have indeed heard of you, but I don't know you." "What do you mean?" Concubine Lan seemed to be interested. She picked up the teacup at hand, took a sip, and asked softly. "I heard that, Your Highness, aren't you grounded?" Xiao Wanru said. She looked Concubine Lan up and down and couldn't help praising her again. No wonder it was said that Concubine Lan used to be the most favored concubine in the Imperial harem. It seemed that she was the most favored concubine in the Imperial harem. However, why was she grounded and not allowed to go in and out at will? Moreover, she specially sent guards to guard her. Did Prince Chen say that? Concubine Lan raised her eyes and asked softly. She still looked elegant, but there seemed to be something inexplicably in her eyes that Xiao Wanru couldn't see through. "No, Prince Chen didn't say that. I heard someone mention it by chance when I entered the Imperial Palace." Xiao Wanru shook her head and said, "Could it be fake?" "In fact, it's not fake, but there's another reason," Concubine Lan said with a smile and slowly lowered her head with a trace of sadness in her eyes. Concubine Lan was obviously and with a story. "Well, let's not talk about it. The past will only make us sad," Concubine Lan said. She reached out and pushed the ornamental box in front of Xiao Wanru with an increasingly amiable look. "This is my gift for our first meeting. Please accept it, Prince Chen. It's not a good thing. It's just a casual ornament." After saying that, she stood up and said, "I've been out for a long time. If I don't go back soon, I'm afraid that I'll be discovered." "Your Highness, are you going back?" Xiao Wanru couldn't help standing up. "I'm leaving." Concubine Lan turned around with a deep look in her eyes. Although she was still smiling, her smile looked inexplicably sad. "I rarely have a chance to come out now. Even if I come out, it's not convenient for me to meet too many people. After you go back, don't mention it to the Empress Dowager." Did she mean that she came out secretly? Looking at all the decorations in the pavilion, they were all carefully arranged, but now they were casually thrown here. Concubine Lan was indeed worthy of being a favorite concubine. Even at this time, she didn't look embarrassed at all. If she hadn't said it herself, Xiao Wanru really wouldn't have thought that she was just a past favorite concubine. "Goodbye, Your Highness," Xiao Wanru said softly. Concubine Lan smiled slightly and seemed to want to leave. However, she suddenly turned around and walked back before she reached the entrance of the pavilion. Xiao Wanru looked at concubine Lan holding her hand in astonishment. She looked at her and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. The calmness at the corners of her eyes seemed to disappear in the moment she turned around. Her beautiful eyes were full of excitement and unspeakable sadness. "Your Highness," the palace maid outside the pavilion suddenly said loudly. Concubine Lan's slightly trembling lips stiffened in this call. "Your Highness, you can go back now." The palace maid suddenly came in a hurry and reached out to help Concubine Lan. Concubine Lan, who was so excited that she seemed to want to say something just now, immediately put down her hand weakly and tried to smile at Xiao Wanru, as if she wanted to give her a kind smile. Unexpectedly, a tear fell from the corner of her eye. "Your Highness." Another eunuch also entered the pavilion in a hurry. Xiao Wanru took a few steps back and made way for them. "Your Highness, it's time for us to go back," the eunuch said in a low voice, reached out to hold the other side of Concubine Lan, and said softly and gently. "Your Highness, if we don't go back now, we will be discovered." At that time, the palace maid's voice was also very soft, with a hint of nervousness that Xiao Wanru could hear clearly. Were these two palace maids stopping Concubine Lan from doing something? Xiao Wanru slowly narrowed her watery eyes. Concubine Lan was very strange. Not only Concubine Lan was strange, but also the two palace maids beside her were strange. "Let's go." After a long while, Concubine Lan's voice calmed down. The two palace maids helped her turn around and leave without saying a word to Xiao Wanru. Seeing them leave, Yu Jie came in and said, "Miss, was Concubine Lan so excited that she wanted to do something just now?" Although she was standing outside the pavilion, she had been paying attention to what was going on in the pavilion. Of course, she had heard what Concubine Lan had said before. When Concubine Lan suddenly turned around excitedly just now, she was also shocked and thought that Concubine Lan wanted to do something to Xiao Wanru. Concubine Lan is very strange. Xiao Wanru didn't know why she would describe such a beautiful woman in this way. Concubine Lan was very beautiful. Even though she was old, no other women in the Imperial Palace could compare with her. Not only was she beautiful, but she also had a kind of precipitation of time. Her beauty made time even more confusing, making people feel at ease at first glance. Xiao Wanru had seen and drawn many beauties in her last life, but none of them could compare with Concubine Lan. Such a woman was destined to be extraordinary in the Imperial Palace, but now she only had the title of Concubine Lan, so most people in the Imperial Palace didn't know her. It was the case in her last life, and it was the same in this life. "Miss, why do you wear a veil in the Imperial Palace?" Yu Jie suddenly said. Xiao Wanru raised her eyes from contemplation and looked at the three people who were walking away. They were so far away that she could only see a trace of their backs. They seemed to stop there and saw the palace maid put a veil on Concubine Lan's face. There was really no need for a veil in the Imperial Palace. She might have sneaked out for fear of being known. I heard that Concubine Lan was grounded by the Emperor, and the Emperor even sent guards to guard the door. Xiao Wanru said in a low voice. She seemed to be explaining it to Yu Jie, but also to herself. The doubts in her heart did not fade away because of this explanation. It was really too strange. She turned her eyes and looked at the stone table in front of her. Everything was arranged properly. The kettle on the stove happened to be boiling, and there was a faint steam coming out. The teacup in front of her was still hot. It could be seen that she was going to sit here and enjoy the scenery, which should have been arranged long ago. But now she left in a hurry, as if there was something chasing after her. Concubine Lan was really strange, but Xiao Wanru was destined to meet more than one such person today. Chapter 891. The peonies were in full bloom, and they were a national beauty. Such a scenery was rarely seen outside. The peonies in the courtyard were all exquisite, and the flowers were in full bloom, showing the demeanor of an emperor. Even though Xiao Wanru didn't like peonies the most in the past, she couldn't help but pay more attention to them at this time. She walked out of the pavilion slowly and appreciated the peonies as she walked. With no one else around, she felt very comfortable. However, when he saw Xiao Yanru, he lost his sense of freedom. Xiao Wanru didn't expect to see Xiao Yanru here. She heard that Xiao Yanru was sent to a remote corner. Not only was she not liked by the Empress, but even the Emperor didn't want to see her. It was really surprising that such a person would appear here. "Greetings, Your Highness." Xiao Yanru seemed to be very surprised. She had just come in from the gate of the courtyard. After being stunned for a moment, she suddenly bowed respectfully in a very natural manner. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on Xiao Yanru, who was wearing a light dress. In the past, Xiao Yanru would never wear such a dress because of her identity. Even the principal maids around her would not wear it. Now Xiao Wanru wore it, which made people inexplicably pity her. Her days in the palace were probably not very good. Her face was a bit pale and thin, but this also made her look a bit more delicate and pitiful. Although she was not as beautiful as a national beauty, she had a kind of heart-tugging delicateness. Her clothes looked very ordinary and well-arranged. Her slender waist was tied up, which made her look even more delicate. Xiao Yanru's appearance had always been outstanding. Even under such circumstances, she looked more beautiful than ordinary. "Yes. Where are you going, Baolin?" Xiao Wanru motioned for her to rise and then asked lightly. "I have something to discuss with the queen." Xiao Yanru said vaguely. She looked extremely gloomy and no longer as dazzling as she used to be, which made her look less attractive. "I wonder which queen asked Baolin to make such a trip." Xiao Wanru looked behind Xiao Yanru. This peony garden was close to the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace, and it was also in the center of the Imperial Palace. Naturally, the remote place where Xiao Yanru lived now couldn't be compared with it. "It's Queen Zhaoi." Xiao Yanru answered softly. Zhaoi Di was the miss of Duke Yong's mansion. After entering the Imperial Palace, she was conferred the title of Zhaoi. When Xiao Wanru just entered the capital city, Di Fenglan bullied Xiao Wanru with the help of Zhaoi Di in the Imperial Palace. "Zhaoi doesn't seem to be inside." Xiao Wanru said. "This concubine knows." This concubine purposely took a detour to see the peonies here. "I heard that the peonies here can't be found outside." Xiao Yanru said softly, without any of her former arrogance, as if she was really just a small Baolin forest. Seeing Xiao Wanru, a princess, there was only respect in her heart. "Baolin, please." Xiao Wanru stepped aside and said with a smile. Xiao Yanru bowed respectfully to Xiao Wanru and then walked in slowly. Han Dan, the palace maid, followed closely behind her. No one noticed that she was holding the handkerchief tightly in her hand. When she passed by Xiao Wanru, she saw Xiao Wanru's faint smile and her back was soaked with cold sweat. If there was anyone she was most afraid of, it would be Princess Qin in front of her. There was no one else. Xiao Wanru didn't stop and turned to leave with Yu Jie. Hearing the footsteps behind her, as the footsteps faded away, Xiao Yanru stopped and turned around slowly. Her eyes, which looked gentle just now, were full of viciousness, jealousy, and hatred. "Baolin." Han Dan also stopped. Seeing her cold face, she hurriedly reminded her. "I know, but I really can't accept it. Why can a foreign bastard enjoy a high position, but I'll fall into such a situation?" Xiao Yanru said in a low voice. She seemed to be talking to herself, but the viciousness in her words almost overflowed from her throat. "Baolin, we have to hurry up. If the Empress finds out that Baolin Forest has come out, I'm afraid it will be inappropriate." Han Dan reminded her again. The Empress didn't like Baolin Forest, and the Emperor didn't even come to see Baolin Forest. Few people in the Imperial Palace could treat Xiao Yanru well, let alone a little palace maid like her. Han Dan had wanted to climb up, but she didn't expect that she had fallen into a worse situation than when she was in Chuxiu Palace. In fact, she regretted it. But there was nothing she could do about it. Now she could only follow Xiao Yanru step by step. "Let's go." Xiao Yanru paused and turned to walk inside. At this time, she really couldn't sigh for herself. In the Imperial Palace, if she couldn't save herself, her life would really be over. She didn't come to see Zhaoi Di today, but to find out the whereabouts of Concubine Lan. It was said that the Emperor almost abolished Concubine Lan because of her. Later, It was the Empress Dowager who came forward to suppress this matter and imprisoned concubine Lan. This was what she had found out with the help of Duke Xing's mansion. It was said that even though concubine Lan was imprisoned, she still won the favor of the emperor, who would still go to the palace where concubine Lan lived. Although the emperor didn't go there often due to the Empress Dowager's order, he actually went there all the time. Moreover, it was said that concubine Lan was not always imprisoned and could come out occasionally. Since the emperor didn't want to abolish the Empress Dowager anymore, the Empress Dowager turned a blind eye to it. Before Xiao Yanru entered the Imperial Palace, she had analyzed it. She felt that concubine Lan had always been the emperor's favorite concubine and the emperor's favorite concubine. Otherwise, concubine Lan, who had been imprisoned, couldn't have lived such a good life. Even the empress couldn't avoid concubine Lan. All the topics about concubine Lan were never talked about in the Fengyi Palace. As for everything about concubine Lan, it gradually became a taboo in the Imperial Palace, and no one was allowed to talk about it. When Xiao Yanru entered the Imperial Palace in the past, she had secretly pretended not to know and wandered to the palace where concubine Lan lived, hoping to see concubine Lan. Unexpectedly, she was reprimanded by Chu Luiwei and asked to stay far away from concubine Lan's residence. She had an accident in the Empress's Fengyi Palace that day. No matter what she did next, the Empress wouldn't like her. Others knew that she wasn't favored by the Empress, so no one dared to help her openly. Even Zhao Di took care of her a little bit through her relationship with concubine Lan. She had to have a backer in the Imperial Palace. The Empress was impossible, and the Emperor didn't like her now, let alone the Empress Dowager. The only change was concubine Lan. If she could win the favor of concubine Lan, the Emperor's favorite concubine, her life in the Imperial Palace would definitely be better. Moreover, concubine Lan had fallen into such a situation. It was also because of the Empress. Concubine Lan and the Empress were bound to be incompatible. With these reasons, Xiao Yanru was confident that as long as she met concubine Lan, she would definitely be able to persuade concubine Lan to help her. Xiao Yanru sneaked here in the name of Zhao Di. However, she didn't expect to meet Xiao Wanru, so she felt jealous and resentful at the moment. However, she also knew that it was not the time to be jealous of Xiao Wanru. She calmed down and hurried into the peony garden. After searching around, she didn't find concubine Lan. She only saw the kettle, stove, and 2 teacups on the table in the pavilion on one side, which had become cold after concubine Lan left. Standing in the pavilion, Xiao Yanru looked at the stone table in front of her with a gloomy look and a fierce look, without saying a word. Baolin, sit for a while. I'll go and look around again. Maybe concubine Lan is hiding somewhere and doesn't want to see anyone. Han Dan, who was very good at reading the situation, suggested. There's no need to go. She has left. Xiao Yanru shook her head. Not necessarily. Like Baolin, concubine Lan is inconvenient to see others. It's very likely that she is hiding. Han Dan didn't give up. She also hoped that Xiao Yanru could stand up for her. It was really hard for Han Dan to not stand up for her. Not to mention Xiao Yanru, even Han Dan herself had a hard time and was criticized everywhere. Xiao Wanru has met concubine Lan just now. Xiao Yanru walked to the stone table, picked up a teacup, took a look at it, and said coldly with anger in her eyes. She had tried so hard to meet the person she wanted to meet, but she unexpectedly met Xiao Wanru by chance as soon as she entered the Imperial Palace. Thinking about the situation of the attack, she felt that it was the same. She wanted to be Princess Yu, Princess Zhou, Princess Chen, or Princess Xen, but in the end, she became the lowest level Baolin, while Xiao Wanru could become Princess Chen. She was the eldest legitimate daughter of the entire Duke Xing's mansion, who had been pampered by all the beauties and beauties. How could Xiao Wanru, a wild child from outside, compare with her? Han Dan lowered her head and didn't dare to say anything again. At this time, Baolin was often emotionally unstable, which could be seen from the ferocious and vicious look on his beautiful face. At this time, as a servant, she'd better not say anything. It became quiet in the pavilion, and there was only the sound of the wind blowing in her ears. Xiao Yanru put down the teacup in her hand heavily, and the hatred on her face slowly faded, leaving only a little coldness. She said, "Let's go back first. Tell them later. If there is any trace of concubine Lan next time, report it to me as soon as possible." "Yes, I'll go and tell them later." Han Dan breathed a sigh of relief and said hurriedly, "It's late when we came out. Let's go back early." Xiao Yinru nodded and turned to walk out of the pavilion. She was not favored now, so she had to keep a low profile. Moreover, she didn't really want to sleep with the emperor. Although the emperor was powerful, he was old after all, and no one knew when he would die. Young people were more reliable. In fact, it didn't matter to Baolin. At least he could hide in a corner of the palace for the time being. She had been too eager to make progress before, so she ended up in this situation. Of course, it was only her body that she could hide temporarily, not her heart. Since she had come to the Imperial Palace and enjoyed such a unique condition, she couldn't let these factors of benefit run away in vain. She would not miss any of the things that originally belonged to her. It was not the first time in history that such things had happened to the concubines of two dynasties. Chapter 892. When Xiao Wanru returned to the Palace of Benevolent Peace, the Empress Dowager had not woken up yet. After sitting in the side hall for a while, she saw Chu Luchen coming back. After waving his hand to ask all the palace servants to leave, Chu Luchen came over and sat down on a chair on one side. Then he reached out to pull Xiao Wanru, who was sitting beside him, up and held her in his arms. Xiao Wanru blushed with shame, and her bright watery eyes involuntarily became misty. She struggled hard. However, Chu Luchen looked weak, but in fact he was very strong. He pressed Xiao Wanru to sit on his lap and didn't loosen his grip. "Let go of me. If someone sees." Xiao Wanru blushed and twisted her body hard, trying to get off his lap. It was really not dignified, and they were in the palace. "What are you afraid of? We are husband and wife now, and we will do more intimate things, not to mention these." Chu Luchen said naturally, but he didn't loosen his grip and held Xiao Wanru tightly in his arms. This is the palace." Xiao Wanru blushed and said in a low voice. "So what?" Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and looked confused, as if he really didn't know what was going on. Only his smiling eyes showed that he did it on purpose. Imperial grandmother will find out. Xiao Wanru reached out and pinched him. How could he be so thick-skinned? He had such a handsome face, but he did such a rogue thing. However, he pretended to know nothing, which was really annoying. "You are afraid that Imperial grandmother will know. Don't worry. There are only two of us here and no one will see it." Chu Luchen explained seriously, but he couldn't hide the smile on his face. Xiao Wanru wanted to pinch him again. Did they need to see this kind of thing? The two of them had sent everyone out. What kind of good things could there be for them to think about? "Your Highness." Xiao Wanru tried to puff up her little face to show her displeasure. She thought that she was showing a serious face, but unexpectedly, her delicate little face looked a little more cute because of the slightly puffed-up expression. In the past, she gave people the feeling that she was elegant with a hint of gentleness, just the right amount of stunning beauty. But now, there was a hint of a girl's coquettishness, which made people feel that she was more and more adorable. Chu Luchen felt that he could love her more, so he turned his head and kissed her on the cheek. Then his lips fell on her pink petal-like cherry lips, and he couldn't help but breathe a little quickly. This is the Palace of Benevolent Peace. Xiao Wanru was really anxious and pushed him hard. It was one thing for the two of them to talk secretly, but if it was true, when the Empress Dowager summoned him, how could he face her? Seeing that she was really angry out of shame, Chu Luchen stopped teasing her. He smiled and held her slender waist without going further. Seeing that Chu Luchen stopped, Xiao Wanru breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, she stopped struggling and let him hold her. She turned her body slightly to find a slightly more comfortable position, leaned against his chest, and played with a jade pendant hanging on the jade belt around his waist with one hand. This jade pendant was the warm jade he gave her, which was later exchanged by the Empress Dowager. It was also because of this jade pendant that the Empress Dowager made up her mind to marry her to Chu Luchen, right? Thinking of this, her heart softened. What? Do you like it? Chu Luchen looked down at her, obediently nestled in his arms and played with the jade pendant. He couldn't help laughing. No. Xiao Wanru blushed and her hand stopped. If you like it, just say it. Just like if you like me, just say it. I won't blame you. Chu Luchen said with a little pride. Xiao Wanru felt that the bottom line of Prince Qin in front of her could be refreshed again. How could he say it as if it was true? I don't like you, Your Highness. I only like your jade pendant. You gave it to me, but it was just a trick. Xiao Wanru curled her lips and retorted in a low voice. She meant that Chu Luchen didn't keep his word. He could get back what he had given away. Although he didn't ask for it back himself at that time, he obviously knew that the Empress Dowager would exchange it back when he schemed that she wore this jade pendant to meet the Empress Dowager. Her coquettish look pleased Chu Luchen. He liked Xiao Wanru's sulky look more, because she sincerely regarded him as one of her own. Otherwise, with Xiao Wanru's cold look, she wouldn't care about such a small thing. At this time, his handsome eyes became more and more cheerful. Don't worry, I won't ask you to be a trick. My things are also your things. There is no distinction between you and me. No, Your Highness's things are mine, and my things are still mine. Xiao Wanru said seriously, blinked her watery eyes, and curled up the corners of her mouth. Well, everything of mine is yours, and yours is still yours. Chu Luchen said with a charming smile. He had never been a person who abided by rules, especially at this time. Seeing Xiao Wanru like this, of course, he couldn't help wanting to get some benefits. He wanted to stretch out his hand slightly, but when he continued to move up, Xiao Wanru grabbed his big hand. Your Highness, Xiao Wanru said with a blush. Okay, I actually didn't do anything. I just wanted to take a look. Chu Luchen looked at Xiao Wanru's chest with regret, and then sighed in a low voice. When will you be marriageable? It's too slow. I really want autumn to come soon. How long could he bear it? Chu Luchen felt that although he was married and protected the person in his heart by his side, the feeling of seeing but not touching was actually heart-wrenching. His words were extremely explicit. How could Xiao Wanru not understand it? She couldn't help but pinch his hand hard again. He really could be more shameless and thick-skinned. How could he say such words? Your Highness, the Empress Dowager has woken up and invites you to go over. Xiao Xuanzi's voice suddenly came from outside the hall. Xiao Wanru hurriedly stood up and stood aside to tidy up her dress. She didn't know if she had messed it up just now. Come here, I'll help you fix it. Chu Luchen stood up and said. Although Xiao Wanru blushed, she still walked over as he said. After all, she couldn't see what was wrong with herself. Chu Luchen first pulled a strand of hair that had fallen down to the back of her head, and then he lowered his body and gently pulled the corner of her dress to straighten the messy corner of her dress. Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on his serious face. He lowered his body and bent down to tidy up her dress. His smile was elegant and gentle, and she felt inexplicably warm in her heart. A person like him was actually willing to bend down to do these things for her. Okay, let's go. After Chu Luchen finished tidying up, he stood up, looked at Xiao Wanru, and then reached out to pull her out. Xiao Wanru, although she was shy, she didn't struggle anymore, but she was very nervous. Even though she had married Chu Luchen, she was embarrassed to hold hands with him in front of the Empress Dowager. Fortunately, when Chu Luchen arrived at the door, he put down her hand, which made her breathe a sigh of relief. The Empress Dowager had been waiting for them in the Great Hall. Seeing them come in together, she looked at them and felt more and more satisfied. The Empress Dowager, who had just woken up, was in good spirits. After chatting and laughing with them for a while, she asked Chu Luchen about going to the Imperial study just now. Xiao Wanru sat quietly aside and listened to their conversation. What did your uncle say? The Empress Dowager asked, and the smile on her face slowly faded. About this, uncle said that he would send someone to the Su state. Chu Luchen said gently. Who will go? The Empress Dowager suddenly sat up straight and became uneasy. Xiao Wanru couldn't help but feel nervous and inexplicably felt uneasy. Imperial grandmother, Chu Luchen said with a smile, and the look on his face became more and more gentle. You really let you go there? The Empress Dowager's face changed dramatically, and her voice trembled. She reached out to grab Chu Liuchen's sleeve and said, "How can I let you go there? Your body has not recovered yet." She really looked like a loving grandmother of an ordinary family who protected her grandson. Xiao Wanru's face changed dramatically. In the last life, most of her memories about Chu Liuchen were hearsay, and only the last scene was engraved in her heart. In this life, she married Chu Liuchen much earlier than in the last life. She didn't know what happened to Chu Liuchen at this time in the last life, but because of the words in front of her, some things in the depths of her memory were turned up. It seemed that Prince Chen almost lost his life on a trip. Considering the time, it could be the trip to the Sioux state. The southern border was remote. Although the Sioux state was a small country, there were some things that the Central Plains didn't know. Xiao Wanru didn't want Chu Liuchen to take risks. She opened her watery eyes. Although she didn't say anything, she looked at Chu Liuchen nervously, for fear that he would leave. "Imperial grandmother, don't worry. I won't go to the Sioux state. I'm just sending the officials on a trip on behalf of my uncle. The Sioux state is a remote small country, but it keeps getting involved in our affairs. My uncle and grandson both feel that there must be something wrong with it." Chu Liuchen comforted the Empress Dowager with a smile and didn't forget to wink his right eye at Xiao Wanru. The remnants of the previous dynasty had to be eliminated as soon as possible, so it was imperative to go to the Sioux state this time. His rascally behavior made Xiao Wanru angry and annoyed, but she was relieved in her heart. She didn't know what had happened in the last life, and she couldn't control Chu Liuchen at that time. But in this life, she wouldn't let Chu Liuchen take this risk again. Okay, it's good that you don't go. But if you don't go, who did your uncle send?" The Empress Dowager nodded repeatedly, felt relieved, and asked casually. In fact, it didn't matter to the Empress Dowager as long as Chu Liuchen didn't go. Commandery Prince Qing volunteered to go. Chu Liuchen smiled slightly, and there was a hint of coldness in his narrow eyes. Of course, Chu Qing didn't mean to ask for permission. He just wanted to force him to go on a trip. If Xiao Wanru didn't come, he wouldn't care. It was good for him to go out and meet people. Anyway, he didn't care how dangerous it was. But now he had someone he wanted to protect, so he naturally couldn't let Chu Qing get what he wanted. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.